What are you doing? I accompanied my stepmother, who has trouble walking, to a party at her request. While I stepped away, she had champagne poured over her by a stranger. Ha, sitting around comfortably at my standing party just because you claim to have bad legs? I don't care about that. Apparently, he was the CEO of the company hosting this party. If I recall correctly, his name was Mr. Kennedy. I think it's completely inappropriate for a company CEO to act this way. How arrogant. Well, commoners like you probably can't afford expensive champagne, so consider yourself lucky to wear it on your head. As he laughed hysterically, I glared at him, and he glared right back. What's with that face? You're just the son of a subcontractor. Subcontractors are nothing. Get lost. He even made a dismissive shooing gesture at me. At that moment, I snapped. I decided I would never forgive Mr. Kennedy for pouring champagne on my mother and for saying such things. I'll make sure to get you fired first. What? What happened next was the beginning of his descent into hell. My name is David. I'm a 35-year-old bachelor. Even though I'm busy with work every day, I always keep my Friday nights free. That's the time I spend having dinner with my mother. Mom, did I keep you waiting? Sorry about that. No, David, I just got here myself. She smiled and looked up at me in front of the restaurant. My mother, Catherine, turned 55 this year. Her face had more wrinkles now, but her kind eyes hadn't changed, and she still carried her cane in her right hand. She was born with a disability in her legs, so her cane is an essential part of her daily life. But the truth is, she's not my biological mother. Let me start from the beginning. When I was old enough to remember, I was living with just my father. I went to daycare, and most of the time, it was mothers who came to pick up the other kids. But for me, it was always my father, arriving late after work in his suit. My friends naturally talked about their moms. But I couldn't even imagine what having a mother was like. Dad, why don't I have a mom? When I asked him that, he looked pained and said, I'm sorry, David. I'm so sorry. Seeing his expression, I could sense something was wrong, and I couldn't bring myself to ask further. When I was about 5, I learned from my grandmother that my biological mother had abandoned me and my father right after I was born. She had run off with another man. I had suspected as much, but knowing that my own mother had forsaken me left a scar on my heart. When I had been in elementary school for a little while, my father approached me nervously. David, there's someone I'd like you to meet. Someone you want me to meet. That's when he introduced me to a woman named Catherine. At the time, my father was about 35 years old, the same age I am now. Catherine was 27. David, I'm thinking of marrying Catherine here. She'll be your mother. Is that okay with you? I was taken aback. It wasn't surprising, considering I had never had a mother in my life, and suddenly, I was being told I'd have one. There was also something I was curious about. Why do you use a cane, miss? Looking back, it was rude to ask that question right off the bat. But back then, I was just a little kid. Nice to meet you, David. I was born with a disability in my legs. I can walk with a cane, though. Would you mind having a mother like me? Catherine spoke with a hint of uncertainty, but I shook my head. No, I'm happy to have a mom. Great. If David is okay with it, let's shake hands to say, looking forward to living together from now on, but. We shook hands. I remember how soft and warm her hand felt. After that, my father brought me to meet Catherine a few more times. Each time, she made me homemade snacks or helped me with my studies. I grew fond of her and gradually found myself talking to her more easily. 6 months after we met, my father and Catherine got married. It was my father's second marriage, but Catherine's first. They worked at the same company, which is how they met. Catherine didn't want a lavish wedding, so they simply took a commemorative photo instead. Even as a child, I was struck by how beautiful Catherine looked in her wedding dress. That photo of the three of us as a family is still displayed on my desk today. My father, smiling warmly, Catherine, with a shy expression, and me, in my school uniform, looking a little nervous. It's a happy family photo. The three of us started living together. For a while, I called Catherine Miss instead of Mom. It felt a bit awkward and embarrassing to call her Mom at first. Neither she nor my father pressured me about it. Catherine continued working while also taking care of the household. She was especially skilled at cooking, and for me, who had been eating my dad's limited menu, her meals were like a dream come true. Miss, can I have seconds on the hamburger steak? Of course. I'm so happy you like it. She always smiled kindly, and I gradually opened up to her. I even started talking to her about what was happening at school. A little over a year after Catherine came into our lives, Mother's Day came around at school. We had a class project to draw a picture for our mothers and give it to them as a gift. I worked hard to draw Catherine's smile. I also wrote, "Thank you, Mom." But I felt a bit nervous about giving it to her. Would she be happy with it? I put the drawing in my backpack and went home. While I hesitated, Catherine noticed something was up. "David, what's wrong? Do you have something you want to tell me?" Here. Mom, thank you for everything." When I handed Catherine the drawing, her eyes widened. Then, tears began to stream down her face in large drops. "You're calling me Mom? I'm so happy, thank you." Overwhelmed with emotion, she pulled me into a hug. "Can I call you Mom from now on?" "Of course." My dad watched us with a joyful smile. My dad was there, and my mom was there. I was happy with that life. Dad continued to shower me with affection, and Catherine, no, Mom, supported me with care and discipline when I needed it. I cherished this ordinary family life more than anything. However, that simple happiness didn't last long. One day, my father suddenly collapsed at work. Mom, who worked at the same company, rode with him in the ambulance to the hospital. But he had suffered a heart attack, and by the time they arrived at the hospital, it was too late. Dad. When I was brought to the hospital, I saw my father lying there with a white cloth covering his face. His hands were cold, and no matter how much I talked to him, he wouldn't wake up. Behind me, Mom was crying uncontrollably. Thus, my father suddenly became someone who would never return. From the time I was born, he protected me and even raised me alone for several years. Losing him left me in a daze. Even during his funeral, everything felt unreal. The only thing I clearly remember is Mom holding my hand tightly the entire time. After the funeral, it was just me, my grandmother on my father's side, and Mom. Grandma liked Mom. I didn't fully understand it at the time, but they seemed to get along well. That boy left us far too soon, but I'm sure he was happy in those last few years with you, Catherine." Hearing this, Mom began to cry again. "As for what comes next, I think I'll take David." "Catherine, you're not his biological mother, and you're still young. You can find your own happiness without burdening yourself. You don't have to push yourself." I looked down. It was true that Mom wasn't my real mother. But if I started living with Grandma, I'd have to change schools, and more than that, I'd be separated from Mom. We'd be strangers again. The thought made my heart ache. Sensing my distress, Mom gently squeezed my hand. "No, Mother. I'll raise David." Both Grandma and I looked at her in surprise. "But Catherine, your legs aren't strong, and you might struggle financially." "There may be times when you feel like David is a burden." "Are you really sure about this?" "Yes." I decided on the day David called me Mom for the first time. I decided that I would always protect him and be his mother for life. It's true that it might be hard at times, but it's for my precious son. For his sake, I'll give him all the love he deserves. Even the love of his father, and raise him to be a fine young man. So, could you please trust me with David? Her words carried an unshakable resolve. Tears streaming down her face, and Grandma asked, Catherine, are you truly okay with this? Will you think of David as your real son? Of course. He is my one and only son. I looked up at Mom's face. She turned to me and asked, David, is that okay? Will you keep living with me? Tears rolled down my cheeks as I nodded. The warmth of her words, calling me her son, melted the ice that had formed in my heart after losing Dad. Yeah. I want to stay with you, Mom. I'll help out a lot and be a good boy. So please, let me stay with you. David. As we cried together, Grandma looked at Mom and said, When you need anything, don't hesitate to tell me. I'll help however I can. Catherine, please take good care of David. And just like that, I continued living with my mother after my father's death. Mom must have been devastated by the loss of my father. She must have felt lonely and unsure of herself. But she never showed those tears in front of me. Instead, she tried to maintain the same warm and enveloping smile as always. Mom decided to keep her job in accounting while raising me on her own. Every morning, she would wake up early to prepare breakfast for me before heading to work. Since I got home earlier than she did, I tried my best to help with the housework to lighten her load. Whenever I helped out, Mom would smile warmly and say, Oh, David, you did the laundry? That makes me so happy, thank you. I wanted to see that smile, so I worked hard to help her. I grew older and eventually became a middle school student. Some kids rebel during adolescence. But I never had such a phase. I never forgot my gratitude toward Mom, and that kept me from ever wanting to rebel. Mom earned a steady salary as a full-time employee, but life was never easy for the two of us. We often went grocery shopping together or grew vegetables and planters to make ends meet. Mom, thanks for another amazing meal. This beef stew is the best. Thank you, David. Hearing you say that always keeps me motivated. When the exam season came, I earned a scholarship to the best high school in the region. Mom was overjoyed and proudly said, You're my wonderful son. After starting high school, I got permission to work a part-time job. I wanted to make life a little easier for Mom. David, I'm grateful you're working part-time, but remember, your main responsibility is to study. I'd rather you focus on your education and not worry about me. Hearing her concerns, I made sure my grades didn't slip. I managed to maintain the top rank in my grade for 3 years straight. It wasn't easy, of course, but when I thought about the sacrifices Mom had made, it felt manageable. Finally, my senior year arrived. David, you haven't told me much about your plans after high school. What are you planning to do? One day, Mom asked me this question, and I answered. Well, I'm thinking of becoming a civil servant after graduation. I'll probably pass the exam, so don't worry. Wait. David, you've never mentioned wanting to be a civil servant before. Is that what you really want? Not exactly. I just want to become independent as soon as possible. Being a civil servant means stable income, and I could help you out more. Right? Mom's eyes widened. And then her voice turned sharp. David! Sit down right now. Huh? Okay. It was rare for Mom to show anger, but at that moment, she clearly was. I nervously sat and looked up at her. David, children should never hold back for the sake of their parents. Your teacher told me you're an outstanding student who can get into any college. Don't you really want to go to college? I hesitated. The truth was, I did want to go to college and study something I was passionate about. But that would mean living on my own and paying for tuition, which I knew would be a huge financial burden. But college costs too much, and I don't want to. I know you're thinking about me, and I appreciate that. But don't forget that I think about you just as much as your mother. Mom left the room and came back with a bank book, placing it in front of me. This is your father's inheritance. I've kept it untouched all these years. What? Inside the bank book was a savings balance of several tens of thousands of dollars. David, I've been saving money for your college education as well. With this inheritance and my savings, you'll be able to go to college. So please, go when you want to attend. That's the wish of both your mom and your dad in heaven. Mom spoke with tears in her eyes. Mom, are you really sure about this? Of course I'm sure. David, make your mom proud. Thank you, Mom, thank you so much. I'll never forget this kindness. Mom smiled warmly and said, kindness? That's such an exaggeration. From that point on, I threw myself into my studies and was accepted into one of the top colleges in the country. When I started college, I left home to live on my own. On the day I moved out, Mom looked at me with deep emotion and said, David, you've grown so much. Mom, when we first met 11 years ago, you were so small. And now you've grown into such an impressive young man, leaving the house. It makes me a little sad, but there's nothing that makes me prouder. Do your best at college and stay true to yourself. My chest swelled with emotion as I said, Mom, I'll come back often. When I do, let me have some of your cooking, okay? Of course. I'll make your favorite hamburger steak anytime. With that, I began living apart from Mom and worked hard at my studies. During my time at college, I found myself torn about a new challenge. While it would have been safer to aim for a job at a major company or a stable career in public service, I had developed a dream I wanted to pursue. When I brought this up during one of my visits home, Mom told me, of course you should go for it. David, you only live once. You have the strength and talent to make your dreams come true. Take the chance. I'll always be your biggest supporter. Her words gave me the courage to commit to my dream. Looking back, Mom had always been my greatest ally, always believing in me. The fact that she chose to take me in after my father passed away. And the fact that she dedicated the rest of her life entirely to me. I could never thank her enough. Because of her, I had been able to keep moving forward with all my strength. Time passed, and I became a working adult. Although Mom and I lived separately, we stayed within visiting distance. We made it a habit to have dinner together every Friday. This is the story of the path Mom and I have walked together. It's been 28 years since we first met. Even now, Mom and I share a close bond. Over dinner one Friday, Mom said, David, there's going to be a work-related party soon. Really? That's rare for you. Mom currently works as the head of accounting at a small company. It's the same company she worked at when she met Dad. Her long years of dedication had been recognized, leading to her promotion. All department heads and above are invited. It's hosted by the company we contract with, and they said we can bring family if we're attending alone. David, would you come with me? Are you sure it's okay for me to go? I want to secretly show you off to my colleagues. I want them to see how amazing my son has become. Mom said with a playful wink. If you put it that way, I'll gladly join you. When's the party? Next Sunday. Thanks for agreeing. And so, we made plans to attend the party, and I returned to my place. On the day of the party, I arrived at the venue. In front of the entrance, Mom stood in an elegant party dress, alongside a man in a suit. Sean, it's been a while. David, you've grown into such an admirable man. Sean was Mom's supervisor, the managing director of her company. I'd heard he had been one of Dad's junior colleagues. After Dad passed away, Sean had been a significant source of support for Mom as she chose to continue working at the company. I trusted Sean. Thank you for always looking after my mother. Well, I just worry about her with her leg condition. Mom pouted playfully and said, I told you I'm fine, but you're such a worrywart. Sorry about that. But now that David's here, I don't have to worry anymore. Sean and Mom seemed close. I had long suspected that Sean, a bachelor, had feelings for my mother. Mom also seemed happy whenever she talked about him, and I wondered if they had mutual feelings for each other. However, I believed their lack of progress might have been because they were being considerate of me. Out of respect for Mom's decisions, I had never interfered in their relationship. But deep down, I hoped things would work out between them. As we entered the party venue, the lively standing buffet was just getting started. Sean guided Mom to a seat in a quiet corner of the room, where she sat down. "I'll grab us some drinks." I said that and went to the drink section to grab 3 glasses of white wine. While there, I also picked up some light snacks like cheese and olives. As I returned to where Mom and Sean were seated, I noticed from a distance that someone was standing in front of them. It was a middle-aged man, large in stature, dressed in an expensive-looking suit. To my shock, he dumped the contents of his champagne glass over Mom's head. "What are you doing?" I pushed my way through the crowd to reach them. Mom's hair was dripping wet, her bangs clinging to her face as water dripped down. Sean, who had been away for a moment, returned, his eyes wide in disbelief. "And who might you be?" "I'm her son." "Why on earth would you do something like this?" "Ha! Sitting comfortably at my standing party, acting like you own the place?" "I don't care if she claims her legs are bad, that's no excuse." Apparently, this man was the CEO of the company hosting the party. His name was Mr. Kennedy. I was about to get up, but he poured the champagne before I could. "My mother looks like she's about to cry. As a company CEO, don't you think this behavior is utterly inappropriate? What a cheeky little brat. Commoners like you probably can't afford this expensive champagne, so consider this an honor." As I glared at Mr. Kennedy, who was laughing loudly, he glared back at me. "What's with that face?" "You're just the son of a subcontractor. Subcontractors are nothing but dust, blow them away, and they're gone. Now, get out of here." He even made dismissive shooing gestures. At that moment, I completely lost my temper. I made up my mind not to let Mr. Kennedy get away with pouring champagne on my mother and saying such cruel things. "Let's start with getting you fired." "What?" Mr. Kennedy exchanged glances with his entourage before bursting into laughter. "You think you can get me fired? Go ahead, try if you can, you little punk." His expression was full of arrogance and confidence. Without a word, I calmly took out my phone and dialed a number. "Hello, Mr. Kingston? It's me. Sorry to call you out of the blue, but I'm afraid we'll have to cancel this deal." "Yes, it's because of your CEO, Mr. Kennedy." He poured champagne over my mother and told her to get lost. After finishing the call, I hung up. Mr. Kennedy stood there, his mouth agape, staring at me. "Kingston? That's the name of our group's chairman." Almost immediately, his phone, tucked into his chest pocket, began ringing. "No. Mr. Kingston. That can't be." Mr. Kennedy fumbled and dropped his phone, his entire body trembling as he looked at me with fear in his eyes. "Oh, what's your name?" "My name is David. I'm the CEO of a company called D Corporation." When I said that, Mr. Kennedy's face turned pale as he opened his mouth. "D Corporation? You mean the giant IT company that just decided to partner with us?" "That D Corporation? Yes, that's correct." As I replied, the room erupted in murmurs. "Yes, I am currently the CEO of 20 multinational global companies. D Corporation grew tremendously in the IT sector and recently began selling smartphones and tablets worldwide. The manufacturing for those devices had been entrusted to the company led by Mr. Kennedy, which happened to be the primary contractor for my mother's company. Incidentally, this party was to celebrate the contract between D Corporation and Mr. Kennedy's company. I actually started my business during my college days. My mother gave me a push and supported me. Turning her support into motivation, I kept working hard and gradually grew Company D, which started as a small business, into something much bigger. And now, Company D has become a global corporation. As a company CEO, shouldn't you at least recognize the face of the CEO of a major client? I bent down to help wipe my mother's wet clothes as I said this to Mr. Kennedy. Why would someone like the CEO of D Corporation be here? I sighed deeply. I'm only here today to accompany my mother, who works for one of your subcontractors. Incidentally, I approved the deal with your company to ensure the profitability of my mother's company. Her company deals in essential components for smartphones and tablets. That said, this contract now seems to be in jeopardy. As I spoke calmly, Mr. Kennedy visibly trembled. I didn't know. I deeply apologize for the grave disrespect I showed to your mother. Please forgive me. But I stared coldly at Mr. Kennedy. As you can see, my mother has trouble walking. Without her cane, she cannot even stand. That's why she found a seat in the corner of the venue, as any reasonable person would. And yet, you noticed her and told her she was in the way, didn't you? My mother spoke up then. I explained that I have a disability. But he said, "What kind of company hires someone like you, and a company that employs a person like this must be terrible." Hearing this made my blood boil. Mr. Kennedy, you have no problem saying such things to someone with a disability? As a corporate CEO, or rather as a human being, your words are despicable. I now realize my decision was not a mistake. Mr. Kennedy stammered, I. Unable to form a coherent response. That's when Sean, an employee at the subcontractor, spoke up. Our company may be small, but we actively hire and support individuals with disabilities. In fact, Catherine does an excellent job here. Regardless of your position as the primary contractor, as a leader, it's unacceptable for you to speak to an employee that way. It must have taken great courage for Sean to stand up to the primary contractor. His words reassured me. I'm truly sorry. I deeply regret my actions, Mr. Kennedy said, bowing his head. But I spoke with anger etched on my face. Listen carefully. The person you mocked and poured champagne on is my one and only family. After my father passed away, she took me in as her own, even though I wasn't her biological son. She raised me with all her love and support. She's the one who has always been there for me. My mother, her eyes brimming with tears, whispered, David. I put an arm around her shoulder and glared at Mr. Kennedy. And yet, you insulted her. I can never forgive you for that. You will take full responsibility. This deal is cancelled. This party was meaningless. The room was silent, and all eyes were on us. Mr. Kennedy's employees and affiliated company CEOs looked pale as they watched. Please, don't say that. Please forgive me. If this contract falls through, it'll be a devastating blow to our company. I beg you. Mr. Kennedy, with tears streaming down his face, dropped to his knees. And then, he bowed down to me in apology. Before apologizing to me, you should apologize to my mother, I said coldly. Mr. Kennedy turned to my mother and prostrated himself. I sincerely apologize for my disrespect, ma'am. Please, I beg you to convince your son not to terminate the contract. My mother responds firmly to Mr. Kennedy. I, too, am deeply offended by your actions. I have no intention of interfering with my son's decision. That can't be. Once again, I opened my mouth to speak. Since my mother says the same thing, I have no intention of changing my decision. At that moment, Mr. Kennedy clung to my legs. Please, anything but that. Feeling annoyed, I was about to shake him off when a commanding voice echoed from the entrance of the venue. That's enough, Kennedy. A chill ran through the room. Ah! Mr. Kingston. It was Mr. Kingston, the head of Mr. Kennedy's corporate group, whom I had spoken with on the phone earlier. Mr. Kingston approached us and bowed deeply. I sincerely apologize for the tremendous disrespect that our group's Mr. Kennedy has shown your mother. Mr. Kingston, nearing 80 years old, carried the authority befitting a leader of a major corporate group. There is no need for you, Mr. Kingston, to apologize on his behalf, I replied. Mr. Kingston shot a sharp glare at Mr. Kennedy. After discussions with the board, we've decided to dismiss Mr. Kennedy from his position as CEO. What? Ignoring Mr. Kennedy's shocked outburst, Mr. Kingston continued. This man has done nothing but flaunt his authority since becoming CEO, and he's been disliked by many. His dismissal is well deserved. We cannot ask you to continue the partnership, but I hope you'll accept my sincerest apology. Mr. Kingston bowed his head sincerely as he spoke. I looked at Mr. Kennedy and said, "Are you certain about dismissing him?" "Yes, I promise." Mr. Kennedy shouted in desperation. "Mr. Kingston, I don't want to be fired. I've worked so hard to reach this position." Silence. It was my mistake to entrust someone like you with such responsibility. Leave this company immediately. The very words "leave" that Mr. Kennedy had spat at us earlier were now being hurled at him by Mr. Kingston. Defeated, Mr. Kennedy slumped to the floor in despair. "Mr. Kingston, if you can dismiss Mr. Kennedy, we will continue our business relationship. I sincerely look forward to working with you in the future. Your kindness knows no bounds." "I cannot thank you enough," Mr. Kingston replied, grasping my hand and bowing repeatedly. Then, turning to Mr. Kennedy, he barked, "Now, remove this man immediately." At his command, Mr. Kingston's aides dragged a protesting Mr. Kennedy out of the venue. My mother and I merely watched the scene unfold. Afterward, Mr. Kingston reorganized the event, and the party resumed. However, since my mother's clothes were drenched, I decided to take her home. As we exited the venue, every attendee bowed to us in respect. I gave Mr. Kingston a nod and left the venue with my mother and Sean. "Mom, that was a rough ordeal. Are you okay? You're not feeling cold, are you?" When I asked in the car, my mother smiled. "I'm fine, David. More than that, thank you for standing up for me." It really warmed my heart. Relieved by her words, I noticed Sean bowing his head toward me. "David, I'm sorry. If I hadn't taken my eyes off her, I could have protected your mother better." "Don't worry, Sean. You stood up for her, even though Mr. Kennedy was your superior. That took real courage." My mother also thanked Sean, but he seemed a little embarrassed, so I decided to tease him a bit. "By the way, Sean, what do you think of my mother?" "What?" "That's..." Though nearly 60, Sean's face turned bright red. "David! Don't say such things." My mother's face also seemed slightly flushed. "Well, I'm a busy man, so I've been hoping someone could stay close and take care of her." "Sean, let me ask you again. What do you think of my mother?" Then Sean spoke clearly. "The truth is, I've thought of Catherine as someone very special for a long time." "Sean, but I've seen how hard Catherine worked after losing David's father, raising him with everything she had. I thought if I shared my feelings, it might shock or confuse her." I nodded at his words and turned to my mother. "There you have it, Mom. What's your answer to Sean?" My mother looks confused as she glances back and forth between Sean and me. She seems unsure of what to say. Sensing her hesitation, I spoke gently. "Mom, it's okay for you to be happy. Ha! You've done so much for me, always putting me first, always trying to be the best mother you could. But I'm okay now. It's your turn to find happiness. If you care about Sean, I want you to take his hand and be with someone who values you." My mother's eyes glistened with tears as she replied in a trembling voice, "I also think of Sean as someone very dear to me." "Sean, may I take your hand?" Sean's face lit up with joy as he exclaimed, "Of course." I smiled as I watched the two of them clasp hands. This is what happened afterward. Mr. Kingston kept his promise and officially dismissed Mr. Kennedy from his position. Having been removed from the company, Mr. Kennedy became a shadow of his former self. It's said that he squandered his wealth during his tenure, leaving him with little savings. His wife divorced him, his children abandoned him. And now he lives alone, shut away in his home. It seems he'll spend the rest of his life in isolation, unable to find another job. Yet, I feel no sympathy for him. As for me, the smartphones and tablets D Corporation launched were a huge success, and the company continued to grow rapidly. I now travel the world as a busy CEO, overseeing our global operations. Despite my hectic schedule, I don't worry much about my mother. That's because Sean is by her side. The two of them got married, and my mother moved into Sean's apartment, where they now live together. Sean is completely devoted to her, which gives me great peace of mind. One day, while I was at work, my phone rang. "David? How are you doing?" "I'm doing fine, Mom." "Well, Sean and I are thinking of going to the US for our honeymoon. I'd love to see one of your company's offices while we're there." "Of course. I'll take you to some of my favorite spots while you're here." Hearing that, my mother laughed happily. I'll always remember to be grateful to my mother and continue to live my life to the fullest. Damn it! I slipped. I accidentally shredded your driver's license. The next moment, Chris, my manager, actually fed my driver's license into the shredder. With a grating noise, the license was mercilessly shredded into tiny pieces. Are you serious? That's hilarious. Guess I'll be driving instead. The two elite employees glanced at each other and burst into laughter. Chris, as if mocking my frozen expression, continued in an icy tone. You're useless here anyway. It's not like you're going to contribute to the negotiations. You're just dead weight. A nobody from an unknown college. A wave of humiliation and helplessness swept over me. It felt as though all my efforts and struggles had been invalidated in a single moment. My chest tightened, and I couldn't muster a word, choking on my frustration. I had no choice but to endure it. Yet, the condescending look in Chris's eyes ignited a rebellious spark within me. I couldn't let myself accept this humiliation. Trying to sound calm, despite my trembling voice, I said, "Then I'll stay." This action by Chris would later lead to an unforeseen turn of events. My name is Kevin, and I'm 33 years old this year. After graduating from an unknown private university that nobody knows, I landed my current job. Back in high school, I had no aspirations for the future and saw no appeal in attending college. But my parents persistently pushed me to study, and begrudgingly, I ended up applying for universities. Having no interest in academics, I wasn't prepared, nor did I make much effort. I slacked off. As expected, reality hit hard, and I didn't even come close to getting into a reputable university. The school I got into was one few people had even heard of. My parents were happy regardless, but I honestly didn't care. Still, I felt a small sense of relief knowing I had been accepted somewhere. When I started college, I found the campus surprisingly lively, with packed classrooms and bustling activity. I tried my best to adapt to this new environment, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Amid all this, I decided to take up a part-time job to earn some spending money. I chose a small local restaurant that opened just before lunch. It was the perfect size for a student like me. At first, the job was just a way to make money. I worked without much enthusiasm, simply following orders and waiting for the hours to pass. However, my mindset began to change as I spent more time around Marcus, the restaurant's manager. Marcus always approached his work with seriousness and sincerity. His attitude went beyond the scope of simply running a restaurant. Every day, he focused on customer satisfaction and put great effort into training the staff. At first, I found it exhausting, but little by little, I started to be influenced by him. One day, Marcus said to me, "Let's work together to make today a day our customers will be glad they came." Though it wasn't a specific directive, his words had an inexplicable power. After that, I began to take my job more seriously. Even during the busiest times, when I wanted to quit out of sheer frustration, Marcus's presence kept me going. He was always calm, always smiling, and never stopped thinking about the customers, no matter the circumstances. It was refreshing to see, and I even started to think I wanted to become an adult like him someday. While there was value in what I learned at college, my part-time job became more like a real-world school where I learned about work ethics and attitudes. Marcus's influence steadily changed my perspective on work. Through the job, I learned about the challenges of customer service, the importance of teamwork, and what it truly meant to take responsibility. But the most impactful lesson was watching Marcus's dedication to ensuring customer satisfaction, always working with a smile. That left a lasting mark on me. For me, Marcus's work ethic became an ideal to aspire to. One particularly busy lunch shift, the restaurant was packed with students and nearby office workers. While everyone was bustling around, Marcus continued to smile and calmly gave instructions. On busy days, both the kitchen and the dining area often found themselves short on breathing room. When a new kitchen staff member struggled with their tasks, Marcus quickly stepped in to assist. "Leave this to me. You all focus on welcoming the customers," he said, giving the rookie simple instructions before swiftly preparing the food effortlessly. His demeanor remained calm and warm as always, putting not just the rookie but the entire staff at ease. That same day, we faced another challenge. A piece of equipment broke due to a staff member's mistake. Under normal circumstances, such a situation might have led to panic, but Marcus kept his composure. "Don't worry. Let's figure out the next step," he said with a smile, never blaming anyone. He quickly came up with an alternative plan and issued precise instructions. Thanks to his wealth of experience, the impact of the problem was minimized. When a staff member fell ill, Marcus immediately urged them to rest and adjusted everyone's workloads to prevent added strain on the team. Marcus, who always cared about the well-being of his employees, brought a warm, family-like atmosphere to the workplace. In addition to ensuring customer satisfaction, he created an environment where everyone could work comfortably. Watching Marcus's approach inspired all of us. We began to take pride in our work and naturally found meaning in it. The positive energy he brought to the team seemed to radiate throughout the restaurant, even reaching the customers. Marcus never forgot to express gratitude. "Thanks for your hard work today," he'd say to everyone at the end of a shift. It might have been a small gesture, but it meant a great deal to us, serving as a source of motivation. From Marcus, I learned that working isn't just about efficiency or results, it's about how we collaborate as a team and care for one another. His work ethic and philosophy remain deeply ingrained in my heart to this day. After my university classes, I'd head to the restaurant, put on my uniform, and think about the flow of the day while recalling Marcus's teachings. Watching how Marcus worked made me want to grow and change myself. One day, after the usual busy lunch rush, the restaurant finally calmed down. A family consisting of grandparents, parents, and a small child came in. It was a holiday, and we were all a bit tired from the heavy workload. But as soon as I saw their happy smiles, my mood shifted instantly. When I went to take their order, the grandfather told me something special. "It's my grandson's birthday today." Hearing that, I wanted to do something to celebrate. After consulting with the other staff, we decided to secretly prepare a small dessert plate. Seeing the child's excitement over the food brought a natural smile to all of our faces. When we brought out the dessert plate, we sang happy birthday together with the other staff, and the surrounding customers joined in as well. The entire family was deeply moved by the gesture. Realizing that such a small act of service could create such a joyful moment warmed my heart. As they were leaving, the mother turned to us and said, "Thank you so much. This was an unforgettable birthday." In that moment, I truly felt the joy of contributing to someone's happiness through work. These experiences made me feel a growing sense of fulfillment in what I did. What started as a simple part-time job to earn pocket money had transformed into something much more meaningful. The words of gratitude from customers became the greatest reward. Marcus often told us, it's the little connections with customers that elevate the atmosphere of the restaurant. Through my own experiences, I began to understand the truth behind his words and what it meant to be a professional. When I first started the job, I never imagined I'd take it so seriously. But now, I know that this experience has become a valuable asset in my life, a pivotal chapter that made me reflect on how I want to move forward. And then, an unexpected event occurred that would change my life. As usual, lunch service began, and the restaurant was bustling with customers. Among them was an older gentleman in a perfectly tailored suit. He had visited the restaurant a few times during lunch and always exuded a refined yet approachable demeanor. Whenever I took his order, we would exchange a few pleasant words. That day, the line outside was long, and we had to work quickly and efficiently. Amidst the flurry of orders, I realized that one dish hadn't been prepared yet. Trying to recover from the mistake, I hurried to address the issue. Despite the chaos, I made sure to maintain a polite and attentive attitude when serving the gentleman his meal. Suppressing my nervousness, I spoke with sincerity. "I'm very sorry for the wait. I hope this didn't disrupt your schedule," I said, apologetically. The gentleman smiled warmly and replied, "No, it's all right. Thanks to you and your team, I've been enjoying a lovely meal." As the lunch rush ended and the restaurant quieted down, the gentleman came to the counter to pay his bill. After settling up, he turned to me and said, "You're always attentive to your customers. I think that's truly remarkable." "Thank you. I'm just doing my best every day," I responded, surprised by the unexpected compliment. "Are you a college student? Have you started thinking about job hunting yet?" "Yes, but I haven't started doing anything yet," I replied. Hearing my response, he pulled out a business card and continued, "Actually, I'm the president of a company, and I'd really like for you to work with us." I couldn't comprehend what had just happened for a moment. It felt surreal. Being scouted while working a part-time job was like something out of a movie, a dream scenario I'd never imagined. "Our company needs people like you for the future," he said, looking at me with genuine conviction. I never imagined myself being evaluated so highly, and while I couldn't make a decision on the spot, his words resonated with me. When I got home, I looked at the business card again the next day. It displayed the name of an established company and read, "Robert Johnson, President and CEO." Curious, I researched the company and found that it had a stable track record and a positive reputation. A few days later, summoning my courage, I called the number on the card. Mr. Johnson agreed to meet with me, and we scheduled an interview for the following week. On the day of the interview, I visited the company, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. Though I was slightly overwhelmed by the unfamiliar setting, the warm welcome from the receptionist helped ease my anxiety. When I was ushered into the president's office, Mr. Johnson began speaking immediately. "I'm thrilled that you're considering working with us. Your approach to customer service aligns perfectly with our company's values," he said with enthusiasm. His words gave me a newfound sense of confidence. As he explained the company's operations and culture, I realized it would be a great environment for my personal and professional growth. To be honest, I had doubts about whether I could work there right up until the interview. However, the more I listened to Mr. Johnson, the more those doubts faded, and I made my decision. "I would be honored to work here," I said firmly. We proceeded with the paperwork that day, and it was decided that I would officially join the company at the start of the new fiscal year. And just like that, I took my first step into the professional world. I never imagined that what I had learned through customer service at a small restaurant would lead to such a significant opportunity. When I shared the news with Marcus, he celebrated as if it were his own success. "You did it! That's amazing, Kevin. I know you'll do great there," he said with genuine joy. Determined not to forget the sincerity and gratitude I had developed, I vowed to carry those values into this new chapter of my life. I realized they were essential in any environment, and I was grateful to have learned that lesson. On my first day at the company, I was too nervous to eat much breakfast. As I walked through the company gates, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety, excitement, and anticipation. This was the start of a new chapter in my life. However, reality soon proved to be harsh. During my first company meeting, I had the chance to meet my new colleagues and introduce myself. The introductions began so we could learn each other's names and faces. Most of my peers were graduates of prestigious universities, high-ranking elites. When my turn came and I mentioned the name of my university, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. It only lasted a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity, and the air became heavy with awkwardness. After the pause, I heard whispers from some of the employees. "I've never heard of that university. How did someone from there even get hired here?" I felt my face flush, but I managed to finish my introduction despite the intense discomfort. A wave of embarrassment washed over me, but at the same time, I remembered the day Mr. Johnson had scouted me. I couldn't let myself crumble here. The thought of that strengthened my resolve. I was determined to work harder, to prove myself, and to live up to his expectations. However, just as my resolve solidified, the harassment began. The ringleader was my manager, Chris, aided by two elite colleagues, Amanda and James. Chris would blow minor mistakes out of proportion, making snide remarks to provoke me. Whenever he did, the elite colleagues would either laugh along or actively join in, turning it into a daily routine of ridicule. Even when I achieved good results, Chris never acknowledged them. As time passed, the harassment escalated. Amanda and James, skilled at flattering Chris, seemed to believe that staying close to him would secure their own superiority. Chris clearly favored them, which made my situation all the more difficult. Eventually, they began assigning me the most tedious tasks while taking credit for my efforts. While I stayed late working, they attended other projects or went out for dinners with clients. During my early days at the company, I had focused all my energy on adapting to the new environment. But Chris and his allies seemed intent on testing my limits, meeting my efforts with cold indifference. At first, I believed that any mistakes I made would be met with fair and constructive feedback. It's only natural to correct even the smallest errors, that's part of the learning process. But over time, their feedback turned into thinly veiled insults. One day, I made a small error on some paperwork, and Chris harshly reprimanded me. "Such mistakes are typical for someone at your level," he muttered, prompting smug smiles from Amanda and James. It felt as though they weren't just criticizing my mistake, but my entire worth as a person. Chris continued to find reasons to fault me. Even when the responsibility lay elsewhere, I was the one who was blamed. "You're the newbie, you should have been more cautious," he'd say, twisting the facts to suit his narrative. This led to a noticeable shift in how others in the office perceived me. Their gazes grew colder, and whispers of doubt spread. Amanda and James resorted to subtler methods of sabotage. One day, I discovered that someone had removed crucial documents from my desk. I was sure I had double-checked everything the night before. But during a meeting, the missing files came to light, and I was held responsible. "You probably didn't even bother to double-check," they sneered. Graduates from no-name universities really lack attention to detail, don't they? The two colleagues smirked coldly as they exchanged glances. In that moment, a wave of frustration and anger surged within me. But even then, I knew I couldn't back down. I resolved to steadily increase what I could do, bit by bit. On one project, I finally began to see the potential for significant results. But just before the breakthrough, Chris intervened. "This project is too advanced for you," he said, reassigning it to Amanda and James. Years of effort evaporated in an instant as they gleefully took over and claimed the credit for my work. I was powerless to stop them, forced to watch as my efforts were stolen right in front of me. Weeks later, while working on another proposal, Chris altered the instructions just before the deadline. The changes were unreasonable, almost impossible to execute. "If you don't handle this quickly, it'll damage our department's reputation," he said, pushing the responsibility solely onto me. In the end, even the project I had poured my heart and soul into was claimed by my elite colleagues, who took credit for the finalized proposal and received all the praise. To make matters worse, there was an incident where an important client meeting was supposedly cancelled. Chris used it as an excuse to blame me. "This wouldn't have happened if you had coordinated properly," he said. However, the truth was that the elite colleagues had deliberately excluded me from the communication and proceeded with the meeting themselves. The meeting had never been cancelled. These small, calculated schemes piled up, gradually wearing down my spirit. Even so, I didn't give in. The reason I could keep going was because of Mr. Johnson, who believed in me and became my source of strength. Mr. Johnson was the only one who consistently recognized and valued my unwavering efforts. I wanted to overcome these hardships, prove my capabilities, and show that my presence here wasn't a mere coincidence. Fortunately, I had another ally. Sophia, a colleague. Sharp-minded and dependable, she was an invaluable source of support for me. Meeting her was undoubtedly a major turning point in my journey. She didn't judge me based on my academic background or past, but instead, she saw me for who I was in the present. One evening after work, we stopped by a cafe, and she told me something I'll never forget. "Your academic background is just part of the past. What matters now is whether people can trust you as a person." Her words, spoken with a lively sparkle in her eyes, offered me a fresh perspective. They became the catalyst for a profound change in how I saw myself. Her encouragement helped me let go of my lingering insecurities about my past mistakes and background, giving me the courage to focus on the future. Sophia's unwavering support became a source of strength that she likely didn't even realize she was providing. Her words echoed in my mind, motivating me to push forward whenever I felt discouraged. We worked on many projects together. Her calm decision-making and natural leadership often guided the team through challenges. Whenever I stumbled, she quietly stepped in to help, her actions always brimming with kindness. One particularly memorable moment occurred during a high-pressure project. I was struggling with a complex problem, unsure of how to resolve it. Unable to ask for help out of hesitation, I found myself stuck until Sophia stepped in. Without saying much, she sat beside me and started helping me organize the issue. "Don't worry. We'll figure it out together," she said with a reassuring smile. Thanks to her thoughtful advice and the team's collective effort, we completed the project successfully. Working with Sophia taught me the importance of trusting others. I realized I didn't have to shoulder everything alone, that moving forward with trustworthy teammates was crucial. That trust became a powerful force that could overcome any difficulty. Our relationship extended beyond the workplace, and we grew closer as friends. One weekend, during lunch, she shared her dreams with me. "One day, I want to launch a project based on my own ideas. Wouldn't it be amazing to see your vision come to life?" Her eyes sparkled with hope as she spoke, and her words reignited a dormant sense of ambition within me. I may not have the creative talent or vision that Sophia has, but I realized I could emulate her steadfast determination and unwavering beliefs. Her words warmed my heart, and just thinking of them brought a smile to my face. I began refining my skills and taking on new projects with a steady and focused mindset. Delivering consistent results became my way of contributing, and I never stopped putting my heart into every task. I believed that someday, my efforts would be rewarded, and I resolved to keep pushing beyond my limits. Despite enduring constant harassment, I trusted that overcoming these challenges would help me grow stronger. I held on to the belief that someone out there would recognize my hard work, and I persevered. One night, as I was working late on a new proposal, I heard a voice behind me. "How's the new proposal coming along? Can I take a look?" I turned around to see Mr. Johnson, who had also stayed late. This unexpected opportunity allowed me to present my past achievements and new ideas in detail. "I really admire your dedication. You're doing excellent work," he said with a smile. Hearing those words from someone who believed in me made all my struggles feel a little more worthwhile. Not long after, I was entrusted with leading a major project within the company. As my performance began to shine, the attitudes of my colleagues gradually shifted. The tasks that Chris and the elite colleagues had tried to discard or dismiss were ones I consistently delivered on. And my efforts started gaining recognition within the company. Other managers began trusting me with responsibilities, which only deepened my sense of fulfillment. Contributing to the company through my work became my greatest source of pride. I held on to the belief that unwavering effort would always lead to results. That conviction not only helped me persevere but also set my career on an exciting new path. One day, I received an email. Its content was almost unbelievable. It was a request for a significant project from a major client. It happened on a bright, sunny morning. As usual, I sat at my desk, sipping coffee while checking my emails. That's when one particular email caught my attention. The sender was a client from a large, well-known corporation. The subject line read, "Special request for you," and a wave of tension coursed through me. With a mix of anticipation and anxiety, I opened the email. As I read through the message, a sense of surprise and joy began to well up inside me. The email outlined an enormous project, one unlike anything I had handled before, and the responsibility was being placed in my hands. It was a moment of exhilaration and pride, a recognition of the small successes I had accumulated over time. Still, a question lingered in my mind: why me? As I continued reading, I found the reason for why I had been chosen written in the middle of the email. The reason was somewhat unexpected. It was because of a particular action I had taken during a previous project that had been highly valued. I couldn't immediately tell what they were referring to, but as I read further, I realized it was probably about that project. It was a project where the team was struggling to unite and faced significant challenges. With the schedule tightening and pressure mounting daily, there was still no clear solution in sight. The team's morale was low, and it was obvious that everyone was frustrated. I was driven by an overwhelming desire to make this project a success. So, I took it upon myself to step into the role of leader. Strengthening communication with the team and exploring ways to maximize each member's strengths. To make it easier for everyone to open up, I invited each member individually to a cafe, encouraging them to order whatever they liked. We started with casual conversations about their favorite menu items. Once the tension eased, I asked them how far they'd progressed, where they were stuck, and about their backgrounds. I also encouraged them to vent their frustrations about the project. Not only did sharing their thoughts lighten their emotional burdens, but it also revealed areas for improvement and provided insights beyond my expectations. Understanding each team member's hobbies and interests, something that rarely came up in the workplace, gave me valuable hints for task distribution within the project. Additionally, pairing members with similar interests made communication more seamless, which helped the work progress more efficiently. Although some questioned the logic behind this approach given the tight timeline, it proved to be the right decision. Immediately after these one-on-one meetings, I reorganized the team and held a strategic meeting. This project's success wasn't something that could be achieved by a single person. I worked diligently to explain my strategy and to build a system where each member could fully leverage their strengths. By clarifying individual roles, I ensured that everyone could unite and work towards the same goal. We held meetings almost daily, addressing issues as soon as they arose and constantly refining our approach. The process of inching closer to our goal felt like climbing a steep mountain, step by step. As the project leader, I gained a renewed appreciation for the power of teamwork and the immense responsibility that comes with leadership. Finally, after months of effort, the day arrived when our work bore fruit. The project was completed, and we presented it to the client. Our team gave it everything we had prepared. And the result was far more successful than we could have imagined. The client was full of praise, and the team shared in the moment of triumph, feeling that all our hard work had been rewarded. That success became a significant source of confidence for me. I never imagined that my past actions could lead to new possibilities like this. But in hindsight, I realized that it was the accumulation of small, consistent efforts that made this success possible. The current request, it seemed, was a direct result of the feedback from the client during that earlier project. I never expected that my actions back then would create such a positive reputation. I quickly began drafting a reply to the email. I am fully committed to this project and will dedicate myself to earning your trust. Once I hit the send button, a deep sense of enthusiasm for the project began to burn within me. A few days later, I visited the client's office to discuss the project details. Located in the heart of the city, the building had an exterior that exuded sophistication and solidity. As I stepped inside, the excitement and nervousness I felt grew even stronger. After checking in at reception, I was escorted to a meeting room. The space was bright with natural light streaming through large glass windows, and the elegant interior design created a welcoming and comfortable atmosphere. Before long, the person in charge I had worked with previously appeared. He greeted me with the same friendly attitude I remembered, and the meeting began. "This project is very important to us. We're counting on your leadership," he said. He then went on to explain the project's objectives, schedule, budget, and other intricate details. As I listened to everything being laid out, I was momentarily overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the challenge. Yet, even more than that, I felt a growing sense of purpose and excitement. The success of this project would not only contribute to the company but also be a stepping stone for my own growth and future opportunities. Knowing that the client had recognized my past efforts and trusted me with this new responsibility boosted my confidence immensely. The weight of this responsibility was undeniably heavy, but it was this very pressure that motivated me even more. I also learned that not only Mr. Johnson but also its chairman, Mr. Anderson, had high hopes for this project. In fact, within the company, this was seen as a key initiative led by Mr. Anderson himself, drawing significant attention. The core members chosen for the project team included Chris, Amanda, James, the two elite colleagues, and me. It quickly became clear that this project was both highly complex and carried significant responsibility, filling me with both a sense of purpose and an underlying unease. The unease stemmed from the fact that my team consisted of the three people who had made my life difficult. Nevertheless, I saw this as a prime opportunity to prove my abilities, so I shifted my focus entirely to the project. As part of the project's first phase, I was assigned to conduct on-site research. This was followed by numerous meetings with persons in charge from the client company to clarify their every need and expectation. On-site visits were essential for gathering information that couldn't be captured through desk work alone, including subtle nuances that required careful discussion. Every day, I came home utterly exhausted, but the insights I gained proved invaluable later. Meanwhile, Chris and the two elite colleagues were busy drafting documents and planning strategies back at the office. While they seemed occupied with paperwork, they made no effort to participate in field research or meet with the client. "Field work must be tough, huh? You don't need to go in person when you've got documents to reference," they casually remarked, sounding nothing like responsible project members. During this time, I was juggling both my regular duties and the project responsibilities, effectively doubling my workload. Late nights became routine, and the fatigue piled up with each passing day. Chris, Amanda, and James, on the other hand, stuck to their usual tasks and contributed little to the project. What's worse, as my overtime hours increased, their remarks became increasingly absurd. "Working a lot of overtime, huh? It doesn't make sense for you to rack up more overtime pay than the rest of us when we're on the same project," Chris said with a mocking grin. "If you're getting extra, then we should get the same amount. It's only fair, right?" I couldn't make sense of their twisted logic. "From now on, every time you finish your overtime, you'll report to the three of us. Then, we'll clock out at the same time as you," Chris declared. I was stunned. "Chris, that's really not okay," I said firmly. "What? Got a problem with it? If you defy me, I'll tell Mr. Johnson that you've been slacking off. If you don't want that, you'd better do as I say," he replied coldly. It was a ridiculous demand, but I had no choice but to stay silent. Next to Chris, the elite colleagues were laughing gleefully. "Chris, let's not waste time on someone like him. Let's head out already. I'll show you that great place I found the other day," one of them chimed in. With that, the three of them left, chatting happily and leaving me alone in the quiet office. I stared at my phone screen, feeling the weight of the situation. Opening the timecard app, I couldn't help but picture how little effort they were putting in compared to me, which only deepened my frustration. I sat down at my desk, turned to my computer, and resumed working on the presentation materials. The project was reaching its final stages, and the next step was to visit the client's office to deliver a presentation summarizing the progress so far and detailing the final adjustments. It was a crucial moment, a direct proposal to the client's president. As expected, Chris and the two colleagues once again dumped the responsibility of creating the materials onto me. "We're counting on you. You're the most experienced, after all," Chris said casually, his tone light and unconcerned. "Yeah, if we made it, you'd probably just criticize it anyway," James added, with a smirk. There was no point in asking them to help. It wouldn't result in decent materials anyway. It was faster and more efficient to handle it myself, so I silently got to work on the presentation. As I focused on the task, Sophia, the colleague who never judged me for my academic background, approached me. "Hey, are you okay? You don't look so great lately," she said gently, offering me a rice ball with a warm smile. I felt a bit of the tension leave my shoulders as her kindness gave me a moment of relief. "Thanks, I really needed this. I was getting hungry. But honestly, those three are something else, right?" I replied, showing her my phone screen. "Look at this. I have to report to them every night when I clock out. It's driving me crazy. Every single night? That's awful," she said, shocked. "Is there anything I can do to help?" I appreciated her offer, but I shook my head. The presentation materials contained confidential information, and I felt it was my responsibility to complete them on my own. Even so, just having her there made me feel a little less alone. The pressure was immense, so much so that I sometimes dreamed about working, even in my sleep. However, this was also my chance to make the most of all the research I had done so far. I worked on the presentation materials until the very last train home. To create materials that accurately reflected the client's needs while being clear and persuasive, I had to repeatedly refine the information and review the presentation's flow. After several days of relentless effort, I finally completed the presentation materials. Each night, I stayed late at the office, only to collapse into bed as soon as I got home. Often, I barely ate, and the accumulated fatigue left me dizzy at times. Still, knowing that this presentation could determine the project's success, I refused to compromise on anything. Completing the materials felt like achieving a major milestone. But I was filled with tension about how the presentation would be received. A compelling and convincing presentation was critical to winning the client's full approval and ensuring the project's success. I was determined to give it my all. On the day of the presentation, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves that made it impossible to stay calm. I had arranged to rent a car to travel to the client's office. And as the time to depart approached, something completely unexpected happened. Damn it! I slipped. I accidentally shredded your driver's license, Chris said with a smirk, looking directly at me. The shredder let out a grinding sound as my license was ruthlessly torn to pieces. I stood there, stunned, unable to process what was happening. The two elite colleagues glanced at each other and burst into laughter. Are you serious? That's hilarious. Guess I'll do the driving then. One of them joked mockingly, volunteering with an exaggerated tone. Then Chris turned his icy gaze on me and delivered a cold, cutting remark. You're unnecessary. You're just dead weight, doesn't matter if you're here or not. A nobody from an unknown university like you is just a burden. His words cut deep, and a wave of humiliation and helplessness washed over me. It felt like all my effort and hard work had been dismissed in an instant. My chest tightened with frustration, and I was too choked up to respond. I could only stand there, frozen. But I couldn't let myself accept this humiliation. Anger welled up from the depths of my heart, but I swallowed it back, forcing myself to speak in a trembling voice. Then I'll stay. Chris's contemptuous gaze only fueled the fire of defiance within me. No matter how much they looked down on me, I would prove my worth on my own terms. As I watched Chris and the two elite colleagues leave for the meeting, I reaffirmed my resolve. I wouldn't let my hard work go to waste. No matter what, I would secure success. After they departed, I focused on what needed to be done and decided to take action. What happened next was something I learned about a month later from my supportive colleague, Sophia. Chris and the two elite colleagues arrived at the client's office, walking confidently into the meeting room. There, they were greeted by the client's president and his son. The son looked at the three of them curiously and asked, "Oh, you're the ones who came. That's odd, I was told someone else was handling this." Because, well, you three are. Before he could finish, Chris interrupted, cutting him off mid-sentence. Well, you see, that guy made an unbelievable mistake just before we left. He shredded his driver's license. So, the three of us came in his place. Chris explained, brimming with false confidence. He's just a nobody from an unknown university. We, with our prestigious backgrounds, will handle the presentation, Chris declared confidently. With that, he set up the computer and began the presentation using the materials I had prepared. However, as soon as he started, Chris became flustered and stumbled over his words. Wait, there aren't enough explanations here. Where's file 3? I had designed the materials to be concise, focusing on key points while leaving the detailed explanations for verbal delivery to avoid a dull presentation. That's not it, Chris, James said, trying to help. That file has a different name. Shut up. Don't contradict me. Losing his composure, Chris began taking out his frustration on James, who was trying to help. Wait, wasn't this where we were supposed to adopt Plan A? No, that's wrong. It was switched to Plan B. I thought we agreed on Plan C. The three of them descended into a heated argument right there in the meeting. At that moment, the client's son, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. That's enough. We've seen all we need to. As it turns out, the report we received was accurate. Earlier today, we were informed by your company that the three of you have been terminated effective immediately, the client's son said calmly. The three of them froze, their faces blank with confusion. If you need clarification, you've been instructed to open file 7, he added. In a panic, Chris quickly opened the file. Inside, the message read, due to prolonged harassment and falsification of time card records, the following 3 individuals are hereby dismissed effective today for gross misconduct. Below the statement were their names. Unable to respond, the 3 of them sank into their chairs, staring at the ground. Well, that's how it went. You've really worked well, Sophia said with a warm smile. Thanks. I'm just relieved the client's president liked the presentation, I replied. We clinked glasses to celebrate and exchanged a smile before taking a sip. I'm glad it all worked out, and giving those three a little surprise was just the cherry on top, Sophia added with a mischievous grin. The two of us were having dinner to celebrate the successful presentation and the new contract. To my surprise, I learned that Sophia and the client's son were childhood friends. We grew up in the same neighborhood. He's always been a bit of a jokester, so when I told him about everything, he was more than happy to play along. She explained, laughing. In fact, I had recorded the harassment by those three on my phone. I had also kept detailed records of the time card manipulation on it. After Chris and his colleagues left for the client's office, Sophia and I headed straight to Mr. Johnson's office to present the evidence. Mr. Johnson admitted he had suspected misconduct for some time and had warned Chris repeatedly that success wasn't determined by academic background. However, he was completely unaware of the time card falsifications and was furious. This warrants dismissal. They've brought this on themselves, he said firmly. Sophia then suggested informing the client's son, who she knew personally, and letting him deliver the news during the meeting. The client's son, seeing the humor in the situation, gladly agreed to cooperate. Thanks to you, I was able to keep pushing through this project, I said, feeling emotions I had long kept buried start to surface. Sophia took a sip of water, set her glass down gently, and replied, "You've worked so hard to get here. I'm truly happy to see your efforts pay off. I don't think I could have done this without you," I admitted, unable to suppress the feelings that had been building inside me. It was no longer possible to stay silent. I took a deep breath and decided to be honest. I don't just feel grateful to you. I've always liked you, not just as a colleague, but as a person, Sophia. The words came out so naturally that they surprised even me. The tension I'd been carrying evaporated, leaving me to wait for her reaction. Sophia's eyes widened slightly in surprise, but then she smiled warmly, her cheeks tinged with a faint blush. "Thank you," she said softly. Her expression was calm and a little shy, but her words carried sincerity. "I've always been moved by your honesty and dedication during our time working together. I'm so glad we can finally be open with each other like this," she said. We shared a quiet smile and turned to look out at the night skyline, the city lights twinkling like a celebration just for us. It felt as though all the struggles and hard work leading up to this moment had been worth it. "Let's keep moving forward together," she said gently. Her words felt like the greatest encouragement, and my chest filled with warmth. I nodded deeply and placed my hand over hers on the table. The glittering nightscape seemed to bless our newfound connection, shining endlessly as we sat there, ready to face the future together. "Look at this filthy outfit, huh? Sorry for bringing someone from a rundown factory like this." I had been dragged to a group date by my high school classmate, Stanley. His purpose? To make me the scapegoat, showing off in front of the gathered beauties by belittling me, standing there in my work clothes. "Do your best to make me look good while I land one of these gorgeous flight attendants, okay? By the way, there's no seat for you." I wasn't even allowed to sit, becoming the target of mockery, just like back in high school. And then, this guy? He grew up in a shabby factory and still had the nerve to dream about becoming a pilot. Talk about not knowing your place. Even the dream I once held dear was cruelly trampled underfoot. But then, it happened. "Captain, why are you here?" "What?" One of the beautiful women in the group spoke those words, revealing the truth. In that instant, the tables between Stanley and me turned completely. "My name is David, 32. Phew, there, that's done." I wiped the sweat beading on my forehead with my fist. The clanging of metal echoed in the garage, and the smell of engine oil filled the air. Dressed in a grease-stained work uniform, I was polishing a classic American car. "David, pass me the wrench." Hearing the voice from beneath the car, I reached for the toolbox and handed over a wrench. "Here, Dad." "Thanks." His gruff tone hadn't changed a bit over the years. As I handed him the wrench, I looked down at his face. Sweat glistened on his brow, and his hands, deeply lined with age, bore the marks of a lifetime of experience. My father worked silently, focusing on the task at hand. He had run this auto repair shop next to our home since before I was born. Now, I spend my days helping him out here. After a while, my father spoke again. As expected, it was in his usual curt tone. "It's good you came back." "Ha?" I couldn't hide my surprise at those words. He hardly ever says thank you. I never expected him to say something like this. "You've aged, Dad." "Mom too." I didn't realize how much, with me being so caught up in work and barely coming home all these years. For the past decade or so, I had hardly returned, too busy with my own life. Helping out now was my way of trying to make amends. And then, David. Was it really okay for you to quit that job? Ah. The truth is, I had just switched jobs recently. There is a little downtime before my next job starts. During that time, I'd been helping my mother with housework and assisting my father with car maintenance. Didn't I tell you? Actually, just as I was about to explain about my new job. "Excuse me." A loud voice echoed through the garage. I froze, startled by the voice, my body tensing up instinctively. This voice, could it be? "There you are, David." As soon as the person spotted me, they barged right into the garage without hesitation. The closer they came, the faster my heartbeat raced. "Stanley." I muttered his name bitterly under my breath. The man in a sleek, expensive-looking suit smirked in that same audacious way he always did. Even his laugh hasn't changed one bit. "Long time no see, David? I'm glad you still remember me. So it's true you came back to town?" "Yeah." There was no way I could forget him. He was Stanley, a high school classmate. Stanley glanced around the garage and sniffed the air exaggeratedly. "Ah, yeah, this smell takes me back." "David, in garages, some things never change." "You haven't changed either, Stanley." "Ha ha. I get that a lot. People still say I look like I'm in my 20s. "Yeah, I meant you haven't matured at all since high school." A wave of exhaustion hit me, and I let out a deep sigh. "So, what do you want?" "Don't tell me you came here for car repairs." "Of course not. I've got a good deal for you, David." "For me?" I narrowed my eyes in suspicion as Stanley clapped both hands on my shoulders. "I'm taking you to a group date." "What? A group date? Don't tell me you don't even know what that is?" "I know what it is, but..." "Then it's settled." No sooner had he said that than Stanley grabbed my shoulder, spun me around, and started pushing me forward forcefully. "Hey, wait. What does settled mean?" "That you're coming along, of course. Honestly, we just couldn't find enough guys." "You're just there to make up the numbers." "What do you mean?" I couldn't believe he'd just show up out of nowhere and start making ridiculous demands. I was on the verge of snapping. Dealing with Stanley was already hard enough given our complicated past. Turning around forcefully, I shoved his hands off me and said firmly, "Sorry, but I'm busy." "Just leave already." "But then..." "Go with him, David." "What?" It was my father who spoke, completely unexpectedly. "It's already time to wrap up. I'll let your mother know you don't need dinner." "What are you saying, Dad? Why is he taking Stanley's side instead of mine?" Before I could even ask, my father quickly left the garage and headed to our family home next door. "This can't be happening." As I stood there in a daze, Stanley grabbed my shoulder again. A sly grin spread across his face. "Your dad seems like a reasonable guy. I bet he's worried about his over 30 son who still hasn't gotten married. Just leave me alone. Anyway, I'm not going to some group date. Even if you say that the Redwood is the venue?" What? Hearing that name stopped me mid-sentence. Stanley noticed my reaction and grinned even more mischievously. You know it, right? It's Tiffany's family restaurant. Yeah, Tiffany. Just hearing her name made my heart race. Looks like you've changed your mind. Oh, and that outfit is fine as it is. It actually works better this way. Stanley's voice sounded distant, almost like it was fading into the background. My thoughts had drifted back to memories of Tiffany. David, would you like to eat together? Her voice was so vivid, like she was standing right in front of me. I could clearly remember her smile, too. Tiffany was, to me. That was more than 10 years ago. Back when we were still in high school. Hey, David. What's on the menu for lunch today? Something fancy? As soon as I stepped out of the classroom, I heard that sarcastic voice. That, too, I can clearly remember. When I reluctantly turned my gaze, I saw Stanley standing in the hallway, grinning. Stanley's father was an executive at a local company, and he loved to show off, always surrounded by his entourage. On the other hand, I was... Oh? No packed lunch today? Don't tell me you're so broke now you can't even afford rice to pack. I just left it at home. I shoved past Stanley and bolted down the hallway. Behind me, his laughter and that of his cronies echoed loudly. Back then, my dad's factory was struggling. Even though my mom worked part-time to help, money was always tight. Sometimes, I'd tell Mom, I don't need a lunch today, I'm too busy to eat. I knew that she often skipped her own lunch to make sure I had one. On days I didn't bring a lunch, I'd spend the lunch break killing time in the library. On days I did bring one. Oh. Look at that, there's even a topping today. Pretty fancy for you, David. Stanley and his crew would purposely come over to my desk and peer into my lunchbox. To avoid their teasing, I'd always eat with my arms shielding it from view. David's family really is dirt poor. I bet you won't even be able to afford those toppings soon. Stanley would deliberately raise his voice, and the classroom would erupt in laughter. Stanley, if that happens, maybe you should buy him some. Without any toppings, the smell might be unbearable. Totally. He always smells like old grease. It's the stink of a rundown factory. Stanley's cronies burst into laughter again. I clenched my fists tightly on my lap. I should have been used to their mockery by now. But it still stung, no matter how much time passed. And then, one day, I was dreading opening my packed lunch again, knowing Stanley and his group would swarm over to mock me. With my head down, I just waited for the time to pass. David, would you like to eat together? Huh? Startled, I looked up. Standing before me was one of my classmates, Tiffany. She was beautiful, intelligent, and had a bright personality. On top of that, her family owned a prestigious, long-established high-end restaurant. She was the class president, admired by everyone, and the undisputed queen of the social hierarchy. We'd never spoken before, but there she was, holding up her lunchbox toward me. Why? My mom packed way too much food. I can't finish it all, so I thought maybe you could help me? Before I could fully process her words, she opened her lunchbox. It was a little larger than most girls' lunchboxes. Inside, it was packed with a variety of colorful side dishes. It was almost like, it looks like, a picnic. The words slipped out, and Tiffany broke into a bright, crinkly-eyed smile. Doesn't it? It's kind of embarrassing. So, will you help me out? Why me? Even as I hesitated, I couldn't take my eyes off her lunchbox. It was so beautiful and appetizing that I couldn't even feel envy. Sure, I guess. Thank you. Beaming, Tiffany quickly pulled her chair over to my desk. That day, Stanley and his group stayed far away from me. The dishes Tiffany shared were so delicious, they practically melted in my mouth. The next day, and the day after that, Tiffany kept coming over, saying, "There's too much food again." Before I knew it, eating lunch together had become our daily routine. Then, one day, "I'm sorry, David." "Ha?" I paused mid-bite to see Tiffany looking downcast. I I've been pretending not to see what Stanley and the others were doing to you. I knew they were saying awful things, but I didn't have the courage to step in. "I'm really sorry." It was the same for the other classmates, too. But Tiffany was the only one who had the courage to reach out and talk to me when I was isolated. And then, it wasn't true, you know. The thing about my mom packing too much food. I asked her to do it on purpose. "I thought if I sat with you, Stanley and the others might leave you alone." Tiffany had been bringing a big lunch every day just for my sake. In truth, I was the one being helped all along. "Tiffany, thank you. But now, I really look forward to it. Eating lunch with you is my favorite part of the day." Her face lit up with a bright, radiant smile. From that moment on, I began to see her as someone special. "David, what's your plan after graduation?" One spring day, after advancing to our senior year, my dad asked me that question. I gave him a vague answer. "I'm still thinking about it." I often helped him with his work after school and on weekends. Watching him repair cars had always been something I admired, something that made me proud. But deep down, "Dad, I'm sorry. I don't think I can take over the shop." I had loved going near the local airport since I was young, standing close enough to see the planes take off into the sky. Year by year, that fascination grew stronger and stronger. "I want to be up there, flying planes too," I'd think. "Hey, I heard you want to be a pilot." Stanley somehow caught wind of my dream. As usual, he showed up with his entourage, smirking as he approached me. "There's no way you can pull that off." "What? Have you even looked into how much pilot school costs? We're talking millions over 4 years. No way your broke factory working dad can afford that." I knew it all too well. That's why I hadn't even told my parents about my dream. We were barely scraping by, and I wasn't even sure if college would be possible. Stanley leaned in closer, driving his point home as I clenched my fists under the desk. "Too bad, huh? If you became a pilot, you might have had a shot at Tiffany too." I couldn't say anything. "Both are way too big for a poor guy like you. Just give it up already." Stanley doubled over with laughter. Hearing his words, his followers joined in and started laughing as well. The rumors spread like wildfire through the school, and soon everyone was mocking my dream, saying it was impossible. But amidst all that, "You want to be a pilot, David? That's amazing. So cool." Tiffany was the only one who didn't laugh. On the contrary, she supported me with all her heart. "Tiffany, why aren't you laughing? Like everyone else." "David." She didn't answer my question. Instead, she turned her back to me. "I think I'll become a flight attendant." "What? If you're a pilot and I'm a flight attendant, then maybe we can stay together, even when we grow up." She turned back to me with a shy, radiant smile. In that moment, Tiffany became my first love. The time we spent together became a cherished memory, one that would never fade, no matter how much time passed. "Hey, David. What are you spacing out for?" "Whoa." I was jolted back to my senses by a hard slap on the back, and before I knew it, we were already standing right in front of the redwood. An ancient wooden gate and moss-covered stone paving greeted us. The old wooden gate, moss-covered stone path, and seasonal flowers at the entrance. The soft glow of lanterns and the imposing, historic single-story wooden structure radiated over a century of tradition. It was definitely not the kind of place where you'd show up wearing dirty work clothes. I really shouldn't be here. Come on, the girls are already inside. You don't want to keep them waiting, do you? Hey, wait. Just as I turned on my heel to leave, Stanley shoved me from behind, forcing me into the redwood. Tiffany. I might finally get to see her again after so long. With that anticipation came a sense of inferiority, feeling out of place, and, well, a whirlwind of emotions swirled inside me. Hey, sorry for the wait. When we arrived at the reserved room, Stanley greeted the women inside with a cheerful wave and a confident smile. Good evening. Nice to meet you. Looking forward to tonight. Waiting for us were 3 women. Each of them was a stunning beauty with an elegant and glamorous aura. Stanley leaned close to me, his grin dripping with smugness. Talk about lucky, David. They're all current flight attendants. What? My heart skipped a beat. Of all people, why did it have to be them? What's wrong, David? Stanley noticed my unease and his smirk widened. Oh, I get it, you're nervous. Not surprising, since someone like you would never get a chance to meet flight attendants otherwise. He was clearly enjoying himself, openly looking down on me. Stanley took his seat confidently across from the women and pointed at me with a theatrical gesture. This guy here is David. Sorry about his dirty clothes, but hey, what can you do? He's the son of a rundown repair shop owner. Poor guy doesn't even own a decent outfit. The women exchanged uncertain glances, clearly uncomfortable. Stanley, emboldened by their reactions, jabbed me lightly in the leg with his elbow, still smirking. Come on, David. Don't make them feel awkward. Introduce yourself. Tell them you're a broke 32-year-old bachelor with no prospects. I mean, I felt so bad for you, I decided to invite you along. So, do your best to keep the conversation lively and make me look good, okay? Especially since I'm aiming to bag one of these beauties tonight. In that moment, I realized why I was here. Stanley had brought me along to make himself look better by comparison, to use my appearance as a foil for his own polished image. By the way, I work for that Blossom Holdings. You know it, right? The super famous, massive corporate group in New York. Oh, and this? It's a gift from my dad to celebrate my new job. Can you believe it? It cost $10,000. David, how many times your annual salary is that? Boasting about his job, bragging about the watch he was wearing. And on top of that, Stanley kept putting me down while shamelessly showing off to the beautiful women. For some reason, I still hadn't been offered a seat. Oh, don't sit down in that filthy outfit. You'll ruin the cushions. If you want to sit, do it in the hallway. And make sure to clean up after yourself, use that grimy work uniform as a rag while you're at it. Hey, David, say something, will you? Oh wait. You probably don't know what to say. You've spent your whole life crawling under cars, right? Sorry, ladies. But he's a lowly educated man with zero social skills. As I tried to sit, Stanley blocked me, laughing loudly. Then, listen to this, ladies. He had the audacity to dream of becoming a pilot. Imagine that, a poor guy like him wanting to fly planes. Now look at him. Isn't it hilarious? Stanley burst into even louder laughter, clutching his stomach as if it were the funniest thing he'd ever heard. At that moment, excuse me. One of the women raised her hand with a calm but authoritative demeanor. Her single word instantly changed the mood in the room. You're Captain Williams, aren't you? What? Stanley froze, his mouth agape. Before he could respond, the women erupted into excited chatter. Really? I thought so. 2 of you. I thought so too. The 3 of them leaned in close, squealing with excitement in high-pitched voices. Then, the first woman who raised her hand stood up and, "Please, have a seat here, Captain Williams." She took my arm and smiled warmly. At that moment, Stanley's jaw practically hit the floor. Captain? You're a captain? Oh, so you didn't know? Surrounded by the admiring women, I revealed the truth to Stanley. That I hadn't given up on my dreams. That I had achieved them. I had become a pilot. I trained through my airline's internal program. Internal program? That's right. I couldn't afford to attend a pilot academy, so I pursued it after joining an airline. Some airlines train their own pilots. The company I joined was one of them. After graduating college with the help of scholarships, I worked in the maintenance division while studying and training. It wasn't easy, not by any stretch of the imagination, but even with my family's financial struggles, I managed to become a pilot. And now, I can't believe we're meeting like this, with the youngest captain in company history, no less. You were promoted after flawlessly handling that nightmare flight, the one with the bad weather, engine trouble, and the captain's illness. Your skill is legendary in our company. And didn't a major international VIP specifically request your flight once? The women took turns sharing stories about me, their excitement palpable. Stanley's face turned ashen. He stared in stunned silence, unable to believe what he was hearing, though the women's sincerity left no room for doubt. One of them, the first to speak, leaned in close and whispered into my ear. "David, do you remember us?" Sorry, honestly, not at all. I figured. "Huh? Well," she said with a wry smile. "We're not flight attendants, we work on the ground as airport staff." Stanley had overheard they were airline employees and assumed they were cabin crew. The women had simply chosen not to correct him. We thought being flight attendants would make a better impression on him, so we let him believe it. Got it. But everyone at the company knows you, David. You're a superstar. The other two women joined her, crowding around me in excitement. Rachel, you're so sneaky, hogging David all to yourself. I'm Courtney, by the way. Every girl at the company is crushing on you, David, but you never come to any of these group dates. So we're super lucky you showed up today. I'm Madeline. The three of them competed to introduce themselves and share just how much they knew about me, their chatter dizzying. Meanwhile, Stanley sat alone, utterly forgotten. Actually, I know your boss personally. He tried, grasping for a way to rejoin the conversation. But, that's nice. Sorry, we're talking to David right now. We've heard more than enough from you earlier, Stanley. Dismissed coldly by all three, Stanley found himself ignored completely. Mouth agape, he could only sit in stunned silence. Eventually, unnoticed by anyone, he quietly slinked away. Excuse me for a moment. I was completely exhausted, so I took a moment to stand up when I saw an opening. As if escaping, I left the room and started walking down the hallway, thinking I might as well stop by the restroom. David? A voice called out from behind me. I turned, and as soon as I saw her, I knew her name. Tiffany, is that you? Yes. It's been a while, David. The one smiling with narrowed eyes was Tiffany. You came back to town. I had no idea. Yeah. Suddenly, I felt self-conscious and looked down. Compared to the elegant Tiffany standing before me, I felt entirely out of place. Sorry for showing up looking like this. I was dragged here without any warning. No need to apologize. Tiffany shook her head, her smile unwavering. We welcome all our guests, regardless of their attire, at our restaurant. Her polite tone and the slight bow she gave showed just how much she had embraced her role. She had truly become the proprietress of this esteemed inn. Her deep navy kimono was immaculately styled, and her hair was perfectly arranged without a strand out of place. The girl I hadn't seen in over a decade, my first love, had grown into a beautiful, mature woman. Seeing her now, more poised and stunning than ever, made my heart race uncontrollably. Thank you, Tiffany. David. We spoke at the same time. Our voices overlapped, and that was the moment. David. Hey, where have you gone? A loud voice calling my name grew closer from the other end of the hallway. And then, ah, David, there you are. I was looking everywhere for you. The woman, spotting me at last, rushed over and clung tightly to my arm. Wait. You're Rachel, right? You remembered my name. That makes me so happy. Yes, it's Rachel. Her cheeks were flushed, and the strong scent of alcohol lingered. She must have drunk quite a bit while I was gone. Still clinging to my arm, she looked up at me with a wide grin. Then, she leaned in closer, pressing herself against me even more. Come on, let's drink some more, Captain. Captain. The quiet murmur came from Tiffany. Her smile was gone, and her expression was unexpectedly stern, almost angry. You became a pilot? Yeah. I did, actually. I see. Tiffany lowered her gaze for just a moment, but then quickly lifted her head. By that time, the smile had already returned to her face. Congratulations, David. Thanks. David, come on. Let's go back. Everyone's dying to hear more of your heroic stories. Rachel's loud voice cut through our conversation as she tugged insistently on my arm. Wait, hold on. Her pull made me stumble, almost losing my balance. Oh no. Are you okay, David? I'm fine. Thanks. Rachel's quick reaction had kept me from falling, but we ended up closer than I'd intended, with her holding onto me tightly. Sorry. I'm good now. I quickly stepped away to create some distance, only to hear a deliberate clearing of the throat behind me. Please keep your voice down in the hallway so as not to disturb other guests. Tiffany's gaze was fixed directly on Rachel. Being reprimanded, Rachel scowled and glared back. What's your problem? I'm a guest too, you know. That attitude is so rude. Well. Sorry about the noise, Tiffany. Let's go, Rachel. Wait, David. Don't leave me. Sensing the tension rising, I quickly decided it was best to leave. As I was walking away, I glanced back. See you again, David. Tiffany was gently waving her hand at me. Yeah. See you. A few days later. Feeling a bit nervous, I stepped through the gate of the Redwood. This time, I wasn't in my work clothes. I had dressed properly in a shirt and slacks. Phew. All right. Taking a deep breath, I slid open the heavy wooden door. And then, welcome to, David. Tiffany's cheerful voice filled the entranceway. Today, she wore a light green kimono and, with her face glowing, she came running over to me. You came. Well, I said see you again, didn't I? Though my response came out a little brusquely, Tiffany simply smiled warmly. Welcome to the Redwood. We will do everything to ensure your visit is delightful. She bowed gracefully, every movement exuding the refined elegance of a seasoned proprietress. She's so beautiful. I found myself mesmerized until she straightened up again. Our lunch recommendation is the Redwood Special Tasting Course. Sounds great. I'll have that. Certainly. Please wait just a moment. Tiffany disappeared into the back, and I took a seat at the counter, letting my eyes wander around the restaurant. It was a place steeped in history, yet it didn't feel outdated. Every detail spoke of thoughtful care and pride in tradition. The old me wouldn't have even been able to set foot in here. Thinking about that, it somehow feels deeply emotional. From someone mocked for his poverty to someone who could walk into a place like this confidently. This is a good place. I should bring my mom and dad here sometime, before I start my new job. Thank you for waiting. Tiffany returned shortly, carrying a tray with my meal. Please enjoy your meal, she said, bowing slightly. But instead of leaving, she suddenly turned back to face me. Actually, I was just about to have my lunch. Would it be alright if I joined you? Ah. The words struck a familiar chord in my heart. Back then, when I was lonely, she was the only one who reached out to me. The memories from that time came flooding back all at once. As my chest gradually filled with warmth, I nodded. Yeah. Of course. What followed felt like stepping back in time. We shared the delicious food, talking and laughing together, just like we had years ago. I never imagined I'd get the chance to share this kind of moment with Tiffany again. David, you're amazing. You made your dream of becoming a pilot come true. When I suddenly paused my chopsticks, Tiffany gave me a soft smile. Come to think of it. When I gave up taking the pilot training school exam, Stanley and the others laughed and said, "We knew it." But she were different. She was as disappointed as I was. Congratulations, David. I know it's a bit late, but somehow I feel really happy too. Thank you, Tiffany. I felt a lump rise in my throat. To cover it up, I changed the subject. I've heard you're working really hard too, Tiffany. Yes. Tiffany's expression darkened slightly as she quietly set down her chopsticks. Then, almost to herself, she murmured, I have to give it my all. I'm the one in charge here now. The former owner of the Redwood, Tiffany's father, passed away suddenly from an illness during her senior year of college. Because of that, Tiffany had to abandon her dream of becoming a flight attendant. She had even secured a job offer from a major airline, her dream almost within reach. I couldn't just leave my mother, who was completely lost, and chase my own dreams. Of course, it was painful, giving up on them, but still. Shaking her head gently, Tiffany picked up one of the small bowls. How does it taste, David? Huh? Oh, it's delicious, of course. Just like when you shared some with me back in the day, sophisticated, but somehow so familiar. Hee hee, thank you. That's why I don't have any regrets. The dishes passed down through generations of this restaurant hadn't been lost with her father. Now, customers could still enjoy them. Thanks to her efforts. Tiffany smiled at me as if to say, I made the right choice when I gave up on my dream. I see. David? This strength. Looking back now, I realized that her strength was what had drawn me to her all those years ago. I took a deep breath, collecting myself. Tiffany, by the way, now I'm. It was at that moment. I noticed Tiffany's expression had clouded over once again. I always thought I could keep protecting this place forever. Huh? Look, David. As she said this, she looked back behind her. The empty restaurant, devoid of any customers except me, stretched before us. I went against everyone's advice and started offering affordable lunches, thinking it would help. But as you can see, this is the result. Maybe 1 or 2 more years, at best. Tiffany. The decline in business guests and tourists who used to support this restaurant. The aging staff, including the head chef who had been working here since her grandfather's time. The skyrocketing cost of ingredients. Tiffany listed one issue after another, painting a picture of the challenges the Redwood faced. It's so quiet, isn't it? Paying salaries has become difficult, so during lunch hours, it's just the head chef and me. There's no need for anyone else, that's how few customers we have. With a deep sigh, Tiffany lowered her gaze. Under the counter, her clenched fists trembled slightly. She hadn't given up yet, but having tried everything she could think of, she felt cornered. Her frustration was palpable, and it squeezed at my chest too. Tiffany, is there something I can? I was about to say it. And then. That's why I said, I'll handle it somehow. Suddenly, a voice rang out from behind us. When we turned around, standing there was none other than Stanley. I'm the only one who can help you. That's why you should belong to me. Haven't I told you that before, Tiffany? Grinning smugly, he raised his prized wristwatch. As if to show it off to me and Tiffany. What are you saying? I believe I already made it very clear that I refuse. Tiffany said, her voice overlapping with my shocked exclamation as she rose from her chair. Looking straight at Stanley, she firmly repeated herself. I really appreciate that you visit the restaurant so often. But that and this are entirely different matters. I have absolutely no intention of dating you. Oh, really? For a brief moment, Stanley's expression twisted with frustration. But it was quickly replaced with his smirking grin as he let out a mocking laugh through his nose. Are you sure you want to take that attitude with me? What? I'm the top rising star among the young employees at the headquarters of the world-famous Blossom Holdings. Even Mr. Sullivan trusts me deeply. And we're close enough to spend time together privately. So, if someone like me were to say, it's better to stop going to the Redwood, what do you think would happen? As Stanley's grin grew darker and more sinister, the color drained from Tiffany's face. I couldn't stand it any longer and rose to shield her. Stop it, Stanley. Oh, you're here too, David? Thanks for stopping by to support my Tiffany. Really appreciate it. Cut it out. It wasn't hard to piece together from their conversation. Stanley was exploiting Tiffany's concern for the Redwood's future to pressure her into dating him. And Tiffany clearly despised it. In that case, I spread my arms wide, glaring at Stanley. Leave, Stanley. Get out of here. What? Stay out of this, you outsider. You're just a broke, lonely guy who can't even bring customers here. Ah! The moment Stanley yelled at me. A small gasp came from behind him, and another figure appeared. It was Stanley. You startled me with that loud voice of yours. Rachel. It was Rachel, one of the members from the group hangout we'd had recently. She worked as a ground staff member. David, it's been a while. I've missed you so much. Rachel beamed at me. But when her gaze shifted to Tiffany, her expression darkened, her eyes narrowing with a sharp glare. I came here to declare war on you. Declare war. I don't care if you're his old classmate or whatever. I won't lose. I'm the one David will choose. What? Rachel. While we stood there stunned, Rachel let out an exaggerated sigh. Then, turning to Tiffany, she delivered another shocking remark. Stop trying to manipulate David with your pity. It's disgusting. What? You're acting all close to him, even though our most beautiful flight attendant couldn't win him over. I bet you've been playing the brave and hardworking woman card to make yourself seem special. Or, maybe you're just throwing yourself at him because he's a pilot? As those contemptuous words left her lips, a derisive smile followed. In that instant, I felt a quiet but burning rage engulf me, like a fire threatening to consume my entire being. Rachel! A deep voice, one I couldn't believe was my own, escaped my throat. If you insult Tiffany any further, I will never forgive you. Eek! Rachel paled instantly, her face contorting in fear as she stepped back. I glared at her intensely. Then, Stanley stepped between us. Now. Let's call it a day, Rachel. I'm sure David will come to understand that you're serious. All right. Stanley patted Rachel's shoulder and turned on his heel. I thought he'd head straight for the door, but as he left, he turned his head back towards me. Too bad, David. Just because you managed to become a captain doesn't mean you can save Tiffany. There's no way you can draw enough customers to save the Redwood. Remember this, Tiffany, I'm the only one who can help you. Soon enough, you'll come crawling to me, begging, please, make me yours. Stanley let out a booming laugh, wrapping his arm around Rachel's shoulder as they left. His words were nothing short of a declaration of war against us. I'm sorry for dragging you into this, David. As she walked me to the front door, Tiffany slumped her shoulders in dejection. I wanted to comfort her, to place my hand on her shoulder, but I restrained myself and shook my head. I'll come again. What? But Stanley and the others will come back anyway. If they do, I'll face them head on. Besides, more importantly, the food here is amazing. Anyone who tries it once will definitely want to come back. As I crossed my arms and nodded confidently, Tiffany's eyes welled up with tears. She pressed her fingers to the corners of her eyes, her expression breaking into a smile. Thank you. I think I understand why so many women are drawn to you, David. What? You're so kind, and on top of that, you're a captain. Maybe even at work, girls are competing for your attention. That's not true. I shook my head in a panic, vehemently denying her claim. That's completely wrong. I don't even have a girlfriend. Really? That's such a shame. But is there anyone you're interested in? I turned my back to her and started walking toward the gate. Probably. I'll never get married. What? 2 weeks passed after that. Between helping my parents and preparing for a new job, I made time to visit the Redwood frequently. Each time, I savored their incredible food while keeping an eye on how things were going. The flow of customers hadn't changed, and Tiffany's face often carried a shadow of unease. Thank you, as always, David. But every time I came, her smile was enough to warm me from the inside out. Since that day, Stanley and his crew hadn't shown up, leaving us at ease. Then, one evening, I happened to pass by the Redwood while running errands. At that moment, that's it. This could work. I had a meeting scheduled with a client for my new job. Why not hold it at this restaurant? It felt like a great idea, so I decided to stop by. Sliding open the front door, I froze in my tracks. The usually quiet interior was bustling with noise. What's going on? Tilting my head in curiosity, I stepped inside, and Tiffany, who had been rushing around the hallway, noticed me and came running over. David! It's rare to see you here at this hour. What's up? Actually, I came to make a reservation. But what's going on? Everyone looks so busy. Well, we just got a big party reservation for the first time in a while. 30 people, can you believe it? 30 people. I couldn't help but raise my voice. With a party that large, it might help alleviate the Redwood struggles, even just a little. But why did Tiffany look so uneasy? Just as I had that thought, I overheard voices from the back of the restaurant. This is great. We can finally breathe easy for a while. Seriously, I thought we were done for. Looks like we won't have to worry about our paychecks either. Their voices were filled with joy and relief. Everyone must have been worried about the Redwoods' financial troubles. But still. Tiffany, is something wrong? What? You don't look too happy about this. Is there a problem? After a brief silence, Tiffany looked down and answered in a quiet voice. Actually, the reservation was made by Stanley. What? The moment I heard his name, alarm bells went off in my head. Was he planning to use this favor to manipulate Tiffany again? For a moment, I thought about declining. But everyone was so excited about it. I just couldn't say no. Tiffany's voice trembled. She must have sensed Stanley's ulterior motives. But with the Redwoods' dire financial situation, she couldn't reject the reservation based solely on personal reasons. As the proprietor, she had no choice but to accept it. The event is just a week away. I need to get everything ready quickly. When Tiffany looked up, she wore a brave face but smiled faintly, without her usual energy. Was there anything I could do to help her? That thought crossed my mind when, a week from now? That wouldn't happen to be on Friday, would it? Yes. Stanley's reservation is for Friday at 7 p.m. Actually, I was planning to make a reservation for Friday as well. Ha! Tiffany's face suddenly lit up with surprise and hope. Really? Yeah. I don't have nearly as many people as Stanley, but that doesn't matter. For the first time, Tiffany gave me her usual cheerful smile. I felt relieved, until she said, "Thank you, David. I'm so happy." My heart skipped a beat. Tiffany had taken my hand and squeezed it tightly. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "No, it's fine." "So, next Friday at 7 p.m., a private room for two. Sound good?" Feeling awkward, I quickly made my way out of the redwood, leaving Tiffany behind with her bright smile still etched in my mind. With a resolute determination burning in my chest, I'll keep an eye on Stanley on the day of the reservation. If he tries anything with Tiffany, I'll stop him. But when the day finally came, I wasn't able to make it in time. By the time I arrived at the redwood, it had already happened. Stanley's banquet was set to begin at 7 p.m., the same time as my reservation. Planning to arrive early just in case, I headed to the redwood a little after 6:40 p.m. Outside, heavy rain had been falling since dusk. The hem of my suit was soaked through. What? The moment I stepped through the gate of the redwood, I couldn't believe my eyes. "What are you doing out here?" In front of the entrance, a woman in a dress was standing alone. In this heavy rain, she wasn't even holding an umbrella, standing there all by herself, as if her soul had completely left her body. "Hey, Tiffany." I dropped my umbrella and ran toward her, my feet splashing across the wet stone path. As I got closer, her appearance became clearer. Her normally neat hair was disheveled and plastered to her face by the rain. Her shoulders trembled uncontrollably, and her soaked kimono hung heavily on her slight frame. "Ah." She turned her head toward me, but her eyes seemed distant, unfocused, staring into the void. "What happened? Why are you out here like this?" "David." In a faint, raspy voice, Tiffany called my name. Just that alone was enough for me to realize that something serious had happened. "Because." "What?" "Just now, I got a sudden phone call." Her voice, small and fragile, was nearly drowned out by the relentless rain. Piece by piece, her trembling lips revealed the truth. Today's reservation was cancelled. "Stanley said so." "What?" I froze, the breath catching in my throat. But the look on Tiffany's face told me there was more, something even worse. And then, he said, "If you don't want rumors spreading, marry me." What do you mean, rumors?" He said he could make up anything he wanted, that we caused food poisoning or that our banquet hall was unsanitary. Anything to ruin us. Tiffany hung her head, her shoulders shaking even harder. "Everyone worked so hard for today. We got the best ingredients we could find, cleaned every corner of the banquet hall. I did my best too. Tiffany. David. I have to protect this restaurant." Raindrops mingled with the tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking as she spoke. Through her tears, Tiffany forced a weak, broken smile. At that moment, I realized the decision she had made. If I give him the answer he wants, he said he'll reverse the cancellation. That's not an option. Before I knew it, I had grabbed her shoulders tightly. Tiffany, she was seriously considering marrying Stanley. Stunned, I appealed to Tiffany. "That's enough, Tiffany. You can't sacrifice yourself." "But there's no other way." "Even so." A storm of emotions raged in my mind. Anger toward Stanley. Sadness and frustration radiating from Tiffany. But above all else, it was the fury I felt at myself for failing to protect Tiffany and for not coming up with a way to help her. Damn it. I bit my lip hard, unable to contain my frustration. And then, well, if it isn't David. "What are you doing here with my fiancé?" That grating voice, so familiar and so infuriating. I turned around, and there he was, Stanley. That smug, malicious grin on his face was more obnoxious than ever. "Stanley, you are." I instinctively moved to shield Tiffany, standing protectively in front of her. But then, oh, poor David. "Heartbroken, are we?" Maybe I should be the one to comfort you. Rachel appeared from behind Stanley, her tone dripping with mockery. Tiffany, if you marry me, I'll start gathering people for the restaurant right now. Stanley grinned triumphantly as he addressed Tiffany. Right now. So that reservation, it was a lie? Tiffany's trembling voice echoed painfully amidst the sound of the rain. Her already pale face, chilled by the rain, turned even paler. Of course it was. Stanley shrugged, not even attempting to hide his shamelessness. It was all part of my plan to win you over. They say all's fair in love and war, don't they? In that moment, my anger boiled over. Stanley! I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. But Stanley ignored me entirely, continuing to speak to Tiffany. I've fancied you since high school, you know. But no matter how much I tried to get your attention, you never noticed me. It was like I didn't even exist to you. Yes. That's because you were. Was it because of him? Tiffany gasped, her breath catching. Stanley's finger pointed straight at me. And then, Stanley added even more words to shake Tiffany emotionally. If you choose me, I'll host more banquets here. Regularly, too. What? I work for one of the top companies in the country, you know? I can organize team outings, client dinners, you name it. It'd bring in plenty of revenue. Don't you want to save this restaurant, Tiffany? That's... Stop it. I shouted as I lunged at Stanley. You know she can't say no, you coward. Ha! You're one to talk, David. Stanley swatted my hand away with a smirk, chuckling derisively. As I furrowed my brows, wondering what she meant, it happened at that very moment. Stanley is right. The cold, chilling tone that reached my ears pierced straight through my chest. Which one of us is the real coward here, I wonder? Rachel. With a thin smile on her lips, Rachel stared at me. I checked with a friend who works as a flight attendant. David, you quit our company a month ago, didn't you? And yet, you're still pretending to be a captain. What a liar. What? Behind me, Tiffany let out a small gasp. Rachel, as if savoring her newfound leverage, began walking toward me slowly. She must be so disappointed, don't you think? Finding out the real you is unemployed. David, is that true? Each word she spoke felt like a wedge, driving deeper into the gap between Tiffany and me. No, Tiffany, that's not it. Don't worry, David. I'd be willing to accept even someone like you. Good for you, David. Looks like we're all headed toward happiness, huh? The words I hurried to say in my defense were cut off by Stanley and the others. Between the two of them who were slowly approaching in me, Tiffany's gaze darted around in confusion. Caught between wanting to believe in me and being forced to doubt me. How long are you going to hide behind that liar? Come over here, Tiffany. As Stanley reached out toward Tiffany, he suddenly seemed to have an idea. He rolled up the sleeve of his left arm and checked his watch. Oh, look at that, it's almost 7 p.m. At this rate, the banquet really will be cancelled. 7 p.m.? I muttered almost to myself, drawing everyone's attention. What did you just say, David? Oh. I straightened my posture, lifting my head to meet Stanley's gaze head-on. You're going to regret everything you've done to Tiffany, Stanley. What? What nonsense is this, you loser? Stanley's mocking words were abruptly cut off. It was because, all of a sudden, a car stopped in front of the gate of the Redwood. Through the pouring rain, a sleek black luxury car slid to a stop. The door opened, and out stepped an elderly man in traditional Japanese attire, his white beard neatly trimmed. What's all this commotion out here in the rain? The man, holding his subordinate's arm for balance while carrying a fine umbrella, approached us steadily. He stopped just a few steps away, his authoritative presence filling the space. You'll catch a cold standing out here. Come inside quickly. Ah, I'm sorry. There's been some complications. Me and the old man, chatting in a friendly manner. Seeing that, Stanley's expression changed rapidly. You're kidding. Mr. Sullivan? Stanley stumbled back, his voice filled with disbelief. The old man turned his sharp gaze on Stanley, scrutinizing him. Do I know you? Then, he turned toward me. Do you know this man, Captain? Captain? Rachel's voice shot up instantly, as though she had uncovered a new vulnerability. Pointing at me as if she had discovered a new weakness, she burst into laughter. David, are you lying to this old man too? You haven't been a captain in ages. You're so shameless. Shut up. The one who shouted wasn't me, it was Stanley. What's wrong, Stanley? Don't call him an old man. This is none other than Mr. Sullivan of Blossom Holdings. What? Rachel's eyes widened in shock, leaving her speechless. Yes. The elderly man standing before me is none other than the head of one of the nation's leading conglomerates, Blossom Holdings, Mr. Sullivan. And he was also the very person I was scheduled to meet here at the Redwood. What's going on? How does David know Mr. Sullivan? Stanley clutched his head, unable to make sense of the situation. Now that Mr. Sullivan had arrived, it was time to clear things up. It's true that I quit the airline where Rachel works a month ago. Naturally, I also stepped down as captain. But I did it to become a captain. What? Stanley looked up, his face frozen in shock. What's going on? Tiffany murmured from behind. Mr. Sullivan took it upon himself to explain. It was about 6 months ago. I happened to be on a flight where he was the captain. We encountered severe turbulence, but his exceptional skills brought us safely to the airport. I was deeply impressed by his piloting abilities. Watching Mr. Sullivan speak with a dreamy look in his eyes, I, too, am reminded of those days. Immediately after the flight, Mr. Sullivan sent an enthusiastic request to my airline. I'd like to hire Captain Williams as my personal pilot, he had proposed, offering an unmatched deal. The offer persisted for 3 months, and after much deliberation, I accepted his terms. I now work for a company backed by Mr. Sullivan. They specialize in private jet manufacturing and pilot services. I'm currently a captain for private jets. What? That's impossible. Stanley and Rachel were listening to our words with stunned expressions on their faces. So yes, it's true that I'm still a captain. I hope that clears up the misunderstanding. Yes. I turned to see Tiffany, her expression a mix of surprise and relief. When she gave a small nod, a wave of reassurance washed over me. The thought of her believing I was a liar had been the most painful thing of all. I look forward to flying with you someday, Captain Williams. Be sure to stay in top shape for the occasion. That's why he shooed us toward the Redwood, telling us to go inside. Once Tiffany opened the door, Mr. Sullivan turned to face Stanley. And who are you supposed to be? I've heard rumors about someone claiming to be close to me, a young man who bears quite a resemblance to you. Even from a distance, it was clear that Stanley's face was draining of color. Mr. Sullivan gestured to his secretary, who promptly pulled out a tablet and began searching for information. And then, in less than a minute, his name is Stanley. Gah! When the secretary turned the tablet toward Mr. Sullivan, Stanley's shoulders flinched noticeably. He works in a regional branch of Blossom Holdings, not the headquarters. He's part of the sales department, where his performance consistently ranks at the bottom. Apparently, his father, Kenneth, an executive, frequently intervenes to resolve issues he causes. How do you know all that? Stanley's voice trembled as he staggered, pale and shaken. It was now abundantly clear, Stanley wasn't a rising star at Blossom Holdings, nor was he trusted by Mr. Sullivan. The real liar, the shameless fraud, was him. When you manage tens of thousands of employees, people like you are bound to appear, those who weave lies to inflate their own image. Such individuals are the least deserving of trust. Mr. Sullivan. Even in a regional office, it's intolerable to have someone like you tarnish the name of Blossom Holdings. I don't want to see your face ever again. In an icy tone, he said that to Stanley, and finally, Mr. Sullivan spat out his words with disdain. You'd best start looking for a new job. No way. Stanley's face lost all its color as he collapsed onto the wet cobblestones, falling to his knees. You kept me waiting. Slicing through Stanley's presence with a sharp remark, Mr. Sullivan approached us at the entrance, where we were drying our hair. And then, my apologies. He bowed deeply toward Tiffany. No. Please, raise your head. It seems someone from our group has caused you trouble. Isn't that right, David? Of course, Mr. Sullivan. You see right through everything. I summarized for him what had happened before he arrived at the inn. Hearing this, Mr. Sullivan's face grew more serious, and he bowed even deeper than before. I deeply apologize. May I offer my apologies on that man's behalf? Oh no, there's no need to apologize. Tiffany. Once Mr. Sullivan decides on something, he never backs down. Just like how he insisted on making me his personal pilot. But, looking troubled, Tiffany glanced back and forth between Mr. Sullivan and me. Realizing I was right, she finally nodded with a resigned understood. Thank you, ma'am. Now, to avoid canceling the banquet, let's gather people immediately. What? I'll call some acquaintances myself. There's an airport nearby, isn't there? Some of my old colleagues work there. Oh. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. And thank you, David. Tears welled up in Tiffany's eyes as she bowed deeply to us. When she raised her head again, she had regained the gentle smile I knew so well. 30 minutes later. The Redwoods banquet hall was filled with nearly 100 people. Those who couldn't fit in the hall packed other private rooms and the counter, making this the busiest night for the inn in over a decade. David, thank you so much. See you later. Of course, the staff was in chaos. Tiffany, as the proprietor, bustled back and forth across the inn, managing everything. With beads of sweat glistening on her forehead, she looked radiant and joyful. I'm glad for you, Tiffany. Feeling happiness well up in my chest, I stepped outside to the entrance for some fresh air to clear my head. And then, whoa! You scared me. I almost jumped in surprise. Because a figure emerged faintly from the darkness, staring straight at me. Standing by the gate with soaking wet hair was Rachel. David. Her tense expression softened when she noticed me approaching. The harshness she had shown when she was with Stanley was nowhere to be seen. I'm sorry, David. Under the night sky, now clear of rain, her trembling voice sounded fragile. I thought you might have already left. Is something wrong? I just wanted to talk to you one last time. To apologize to you. Achoo. With a small sneeze, Rachel shivered uncontrollably. Seeing her like that, I instinctively reached into my pocket for a handkerchief. Here, if you'd like. What? If you don't dry off, you'll catch a cold. At least dry your hair and head home soon. David. Rachel stared intently at the handkerchief I offered, and when she looked up, she gave me a faint smile. You really don't remember me, do you? What? I remember. I remember you lending me a handkerchief just like this before. She began to recount her story. One day, as a ground staff member, she had a run-in with a difficult customer who berated her with cruel words. Although she somehow held it together at the scene, during the break, she couldn't hold back any longer and rushed to the airport restroom. There, she cried alone for a while. And then it happened. That's when I first spoke to you, David, the company's famous captain. Oh. Finally, the memory came back to me. On my way to a flight, I had almost bumped into a staff member running out of the women's restroom. When she looked up, her eyes were red and swollen from crying. "Are you okay?" "Here, take this." Before I knew it, I had offered her my handkerchief. "So, Rachel, you're that colleague. Still the same kind David. You'd lend me a handkerchief again, even after all I've done, even after I caused so much trouble." Her voice quivered, and tears began welling up in her eyes. They streamed down her cheeks as she stood tall and straightened her posture. "That kindness you showed me back then gave me the strength to keep working. It became my anchor when I wanted to cry. And it gave me the confidence to keep smiling at work. Thank you, David." She paused, then softly added, "And I love you, David. I'm sorry, but Don't worry." "Thank you, David. I think I can finally move on now, and maybe find a new love." With a wistful smile, she turned and walked through the gate, disappearing into the night. After the lively banquet finally came to an end. As we saw Mr. Sullivan off at the entrance, Tiffany, standing beside me, quietly muttered, "She really loved you, didn't she, David?" What? Had she overheard my conversation with Rachel? I looked at her in surprise, and she returned my gaze steadily. "I understand how she feels." "What do you mean?" "You're so kind, David. It makes you wish that kindness was just for you, even if only a little." "Does that mean?" "But you said you couldn't get married." "Why do you think that, David?" Tiffany kept staring at me intently, waiting for me to speak. It was as if what I was about to say had something to do with her future. "I used to be in a relationship with someone. She was a flight attendant at the same company. We had even begun to imagine a future together, perhaps even marriage. She had been my greatest supporter as I worked to become a pilot. However, when I started working as a pilot, I overheard her talking to a colleague. She said if he hadn't made it as a pilot, I was planning to break up with him." "What?" I discovered she had only pursued me because I was a promising pilot candidate. That realization shattered my trust, and I ended the relationship. However, she absolutely refused to nod. "They told me you might become a captain someday, so I'll never break up with you. I'm going to marry you." Even now, I can't forget the look in her eyes at that moment. It was so intense, it scared me. Eventually, my ex-girlfriend's behavior escalated to something akin to stalking. She followed me constantly outside of flights and attacked any woman who tried to approach me, even at work. This began interfering with my job. At that point, the company stepped in and terminated her employment. But even though she was gone, the fear she had etched into me didn't simply vanish. I'm afraid of women. I'm terrified that if I get close to someone again, they'll turn out like her. Just thinking about it makes me freeze up. That's why I don't think I'll ever be able to get married. The company I now work for doesn't have any female employees. That was another reason I accepted Mr. Sullivan's offer. I've come a long way since then. There was a time when I couldn't even hold a conversation or make eye contact with a woman. When I returned home in that state, I caused my parents a lot of concern. Especially my dad. He's probably still worried about me. That's why he keeps suggesting I go to group dates. Though I ended up running away early that day. But meeting you, Tiffany, that made it worth it. Meeting me was worth it? Tiffany's voice was calm, but her gaze held a certain seriousness. It was, I'm glad I met you. I'm glad I met you too, David. That's why. She extended a hand toward me. Can we start over? As friends. Tiffany. For now, that's enough. And someday, when your heart has healed, when that time comes, I hope we can think about the future together. I didn't know when that day would come. But as I hesitated, Tiffany shook her head gently. That's fine. Because, David, I'd been in love with you for 14 years now. What? Ever since we used to share lunch together, back in school. I thought that if I became a flight attendant, I could stay by your side forever. And now that I didn't, maybe we can find a new way to stay together. Saying that, Tiffany smiled brightly. Be my friend, David. Tiffany, Even now, looking into a woman's eyes still frightened me. But Tiffany's gaze felt different. It didn't scare me. Perhaps it was because she had been the only classmate to show me kindness back then. She had been my first love. Of course. Let's be friends, Tiffany. Maybe, together, I could overcome my fears. With her, I felt like I could face the future and take steps forward. I reached out and gently took her hand. The warmth of her touch was soothing, like a balm for my wounded heart. Having taken just a small step forward, we held hands and, at the same moment, shared a laugh together. After that, under Mr. Sullivan's orders, a thorough investigation into Stanley's conduct was carried out. It was revealed that he had been involved in inappropriate relationships with female employees, pinned his mistakes on subordinates, and used his father's influence to cover up his misdeeds. The list of his wrongdoings seemed endless. As a result, Stanley was fired. His father, Kenneth, who had shielded him for so long, was also dismissed from his executive position. The two of them lost their jobs simultaneously. It's Tiffany's fault. She wouldn't give in to me, and that's why I started acting out. Even so, Stanley showed no sign of remorse, and it seems his doting parents, who had always spoiled their only son, finally lost their patience with him. Learn some humility, they told him, effectively disowning him and sending him off to live with distant relatives. Stanley now works at a labor-intensive job, where neither his father's name nor his inflated lies can protect him. As for Rachel, who had once conspired with Stanley to win me over, she later visited the Redwood to see Tiffany. I'm so sorry for the rude things I said and for causing you trouble. After sincerely apologizing, she looked as if a burden had been lifted, her expression calm and peaceful. And in the end, Tiffany forgave her. And for now, she says her job is her true love. Occasionally, when she drops by, we cheer her on with the Redwood's famous delicious cuisine. Currently, at the Redwood. Welcome. Thank you for coming, and we look forward to seeing you again. The cheerful voice of the much-talked-about beautiful proprietress echoed through the inn once again. The restaurant was bustling with a crowd of customers, and the staff were scurrying about busily. It all began with that grand banquet. Airport staff who attended were captivated by the Redwood's cuisine, which was based on traditional regional recipes, and praised it back at their workplace. As a result, the dishes were adopted as first-class in-flight meals, drawing attention far and wide. Soon, people who enjoyed the in-flight meals, or even those who couldn't fly first class but still wanted to try the food, began making reservations one after another. This is how the Redwood triumphantly regained its position as a premier local dining establishment. Truly, thank you. Seeing Tiffany's eyes welling up with tears, I shook my head and said, that's not it. It's not about me. Even in tough times, you and your team upheld the Redwood's traditions. And it's thanks to your perseverance, Tiffany. I'm sure your father would say the same. Yes. I'm sure he's smiling down from heaven. Smiling softly, she looked up at the sky. She seemed to have grown even more as the head of the Redwood. I watched her with pride swelling in my heart. And now, I am. Fuel load, check. Weight and balance, check. Flight route and alternate airport, check. Standing in front of the jet, with the dazzling morning sun illuminating the runway. I am dressed in a pilot's uniform, carefully going through the checklist. Judging by the clouds, the upper-level winds look a bit stronger than forecasted. David, are you ready? The voice behind me belonged to Mr. Sullivan. His cheerful expression made me smile as I nodded firmly. Yes, I'm ready anytime. However, the wind might cause some turbulence. I'll make an announcement if needed. So please ensure your seatbelt is fastened. As always, your attention to detail is reassuring. I can enjoy my flight with peace of mind. Mr. Sullivan nodded in satisfaction. Currently, I serve as Mr. Sullivan's personal pilot, ensuring that the busy Mr. Sullivan is delivered to his destination safely and without fail. To achieve this, I conduct thorough checks of the aircraft and weather conditions every time. Additionally, I strive to remain calm and composed, no matter what happens, and yet. By the way, David, how are things going with the proprietress of the Redwood these days? That's. Caught off guard by Mr. Sullivan's words, I found myself momentarily flustered before departure. It's almost been a year now. Surely there's been some progress? Mr. Sullivan. Clearly enjoying himself, Mr. Sullivan pressed further with a mischievous grin. Well, how is it going? Taking a deep breath to calm myself, I thought of Tiffany, who radiantly carried out her duties as the inn's proprietress. Since then, we're dating, with the intention of getting married. This time, I was the one who proposed to Tiffany. The wounds in my heart had healed rapidly, thanks to her unwavering patience and kindness over the years. For 14 years, she never rushed me and remained a friend I could rely on. Now, step by step, we're moving toward a future together. Ah, I see. That's excellent news. I'm relieved to hear it. Mr. Sullivan nodded in approval, his smile broad and satisfied. Well then, let's get going. Yes. Taking a deep breath, I headed to the cockpit. As I lightly touched my chest pocket, I felt the handmade charm for flight safety that Tiffany had given me. She crafted it herself, praying for my safe travels. Come back safely. I'm always praying for you. That thought is always with me. Even if there's a vast distance between the sky and the ground, we are together. With that in mind, I grasped the controls, ready to take to the skies once more. Because of my poverty, people around me laughed at my dream, saying, "There's no way you can do it." Yet, I never gave up. I worked tirelessly to make my dream come true, and I succeeded because of one person who believed in me. You can do it, David. I choose to believe in the words of those who believe in me. And no matter what happens, I won't give up. Even if the path is long and winding, I'll keep moving forward, imagining a future where my dreams come true. The journey may be tough, but I'm certain that happiness is waiting for me in the future. She's always been terrible with clothes and makeup, right? And her personality is just as dull as her looks. So boring. The conversation I overheard was nothing but unpleasant. When I went out for drinks with my friends, I ran into a junior colleague from my company. That colleague, Emily, was sitting silently, her head bowed. She had been the subject of mocking remarks about her appearance for some time now. Who could ever like someone like her? She's just done as a woman, isn't she? She'll probably stay single forever, or no, I bet she'll never even get a boyfriend. The others in the group laughed uproariously at the string of insults aimed at Emily. Finally losing my patience, I excused myself from my friends and walked over to her. Emily. You don't need to stay at this mixer, come with me. What? James? Her eyes, filled with tears, reflected her confusion. Hey! Who do you think you are? Don't butt in. Listening to what you've been saying is toxic. I'm taking her away. Ha! Is this plain girl your type? That's hilarious. Even in front of me, they showed no hesitation in throwing verbal abuse, completely oblivious to who she really was. Hearing that, I allowed myself a calm smile. Seems like you all don't know, so let me enlighten you. She's. What I said next left the women screaming and deeply regretting their insults. My name is James. I work for a major cosmetics company. Creating a single product is a tough process, but hearing how much customers love it makes all the hard work worthwhile. I'm fortunate to have a career where I can put my skills and knowledge to good use, and I live every day feeling fulfilled. James, about the new product. Oh, that reminds me. Oh, Emily. As I was chatting with a colleague, Emily passed by. Her name is Emily. She's 2 years my junior at work. While she's reserved and doesn't stand out much at the office, her exceptional performance has always been a great help to me. Did you finish the task I assigned the other day? Yes, I emailed it to you earlier today. Wow, thank you. You're always so quick with your work, it helps a lot. No problem. Well then. With that, she walked away. Her bangs obscured her face, making it hard to read her expression, but I thought I saw a faint smile on her lips. Emily's amazing, isn't she? Absolutely. Thanks to her, everything's going smoothly this time too. Wow, the data she compiled is so clear and easy to read. That's such an Emily thing to do. Although she's not the type to take center stage, Emily never hesitates to play a supporting role. She quietly works to ensure everything goes smoothly for everyone else. I'd say my team can function as well as it does entirely because she's part of it. I found myself watching her work silently from behind for a while. A few days later, I joined a regular drinking meetup with some old college friends. Hey, James. Long time no see. Hey there. Hey. Am I the last one to arrive? Sorry for keeping you waiting. It's fine. We just got here too. Same drinks as usual for you too? I'll go ahead and order. Once everything Isaac ordered had been laid out on the table, we each raised a mug to toast. Cheers to another good day. Cheers. Liam led the toast, and we clinked our glasses together. Clink, the light sound of glasses meeting rang out, and we took a deep gulp of our cold beer. Ah, that's good. Hits the spot. Isaac, you sound like an old man. Shut up, James. We're the same age, so that makes you an old man too. We laughed while tossing playful jabs at each other. Since our college days, these two had been smart and high-achieving, excelling in their studies. Now, they both worked for major companies and held positions of responsibility. Yet, whenever we got together, we could still talk and joke around like we used to. I genuinely appreciated having friends like them. As we sipped our drinks, we caught up on each other's lives. Hey, Isaac, is work keeping you busy? Liam asked, chewing on a skewer of chicken. Me? Nah, same as usual. Just doing my thing, Isaac replied nonchalantly. Really? I always think your job sounds the toughest. Does it? Honestly, it's no different from anyone else's. Isaac answered casually, as if it were no big deal. Okay, but more importantly, how are things in the romance department for you too? Nothing for me, Liam said, shaking his head. How about you, Isaac? Are you drowning in attention or what? Hey, Liam, was that a jab? Unfortunately, the women of the world have yet to recognize my charm. Oh, what a tragedy. Isaac dramatically pretended to cry, causing us to roll our eyes. See, Isaac, that's exactly why you're such a handful, I said, shaking my head. Isaac looked up, grinning mischievously. Oh, is that confidence I hear, James? Don't tell me something's happened with her? James, really? Is that true? Liam joined in, his curiosity piqued. What are you even talking about? Flustered, I turned red under their scrutiny. During our last meetup, I had carelessly let slip that there was someone I was interested in. Apparently, they hadn't forgotten. I regretted that slip of the tongue as their eager eyes bore into me. Nothing's happened. We just talk at work like always, I said flatly, trying to brush it off. Come on, man. You need to be more proactive, Isaac said with a frustrated sigh. I'd rather not risk ruining things if she ends up hating me, I muttered. James, that's sweet. I get it, though. At our age, it's not easy to make the first move, Liam said, nodding sympathetically. Isaac, however, seemed unconvinced. If you don't step it up, someone else might snatch her away. Isaac's words painted a vivid image in my mind. I imagined Emily laughing and chatting warmly with another man, their closeness undeniable. I instinctively shook my head to dispel the image. Yes, I was in love with Emily. When she first joined the company, I didn't think much of her beyond being my junior. We interacted as colleagues, nothing more. But as I got to know her, I began to notice her tireless work ethic, her subtle but thoughtful gestures toward others, and the shy smile she occasionally revealed beneath her long bangs. Before I realized it, my eyes would unconsciously follow her. I secretly hoped that someday I could see her smile happily, up close, and be the reason for it. As we continued drinking, loud voices carried over from a nearby table. Curious, I glanced over and froze. Emily. She was there, sitting at a table with a group of people, their laughter echoing around the room. It was clearly a mixer, a classic group blind date. I see. Well, Emily probably goes to mixers too. She's looking for someone, huh? Seeing the woman I liked participating in a mixer was more of a shock than I had anticipated. As time passed, Liam returned from the restroom. He sighed heavily as he took his seat. Liam, what's up? I asked, noticing his expression. He frowned and explained the reason for his sigh. That table over there, they're the worst. Their conversation is disgusting. It put me in a bad mood. He gestured toward the table where Emily was sitting. They've been loud for a while, haven't they? Yeah, I could even hear them from the restroom. It sounds like the women are friends. But they've been relentlessly mocking one of them the whole time. Oh, using a friend to prop yourself up is the worst, Isaac chimed in. Listening to their words, I glanced at Emily. Perhaps because I'd heard what Liam said, or maybe just because the women were being so loud, I began to pick up bits of their conversation. This girl is so plain, both in looks and personality, so we're doing her a favor by bringing her out. But her makeup and clothes are just awful. Emily, with a face that bland, you should wear something more striking. Oh, but don't go for anything sexy, it might rip, you know? The two women burst into laughter, clearly mocking her. Emily remained silent, her head bowed. We've been giving her all sorts of advice, but you know, the baseline between her and me is just different, you know? Ha ha. Clara, you're too blunt. Sorry, Emily. I'm just straightforward like that. I say what I think. Regardless of how the men responded, the two women continued to laugh quietly, sneering at Emily. Just as Liam said, it was a vile conversation. If it had been a fun mixer, I might have been able to walk away. But there was no way I could leave Emily in a place like this. Sorry. I'll be right back, I said, standing abruptly. What? James? The girl at that table, she's a junior colleague from my office. I can't leave her there. With that, I strode toward the table, ignoring my friend's surprise. Seriously? Then go for it. Yeah, if she's willing, bring her back here. I nodded at their words and approached Emily's table. Even as I drew closer, the ridicule directed at Emily continued. Not only is Emily plain-looking, but her work is dull too, isn't it? She's always stuck in some corner, just working on stuff, right? Well, during crunch times, that does happen. Doesn't she wear work clothes or something? I could never do such a boring outfit, even at work. She was smart in school, but in the end, this is all she could get, right? Poor Emily. The men, perhaps unable to bear the conversation anymore, tried to change the topic. So, Clara, you work at MK Company, right? That's right. We're launching a new product soon, you know? Before she could finish bragging, I stepped in. Emily. Ha? James? I'm taking her with me. Emily, come drink with us instead. I gently helped her stand and guided her toward my table. The woman in the flashy, revealing dress who had been boasting moments earlier quickly confronted me. What the hell? Who do you think you are? Don't just barge in like this. I'm someone who doesn't want to leave a friend of mine in a place where all you do is tear her down. But please, go ahead and continue your little bragging session without us. Oh my gosh, are you into Emily? That's hilarious. You're such a weirdo. Say whatever you want. Come on, Emily, let's go. The two women flashed crude, smug smiles as I glanced at them briefly, then took Emily's hand and started walking away. Shrill voices followed us, but after some coaxing from the men at their table, the women seemed to calm down and lose interest. Soon, their voices faded. James. Emily, I know this might seem like meddling, but those aren't real friends. You should cut ties with them. I'm sorry. You don't need to apologize. If anything, I'm the one who was too forceful, sorry about that. No. Thank you. Let me introduce you to my friends. They're good guys, so don't worry. When I smiled at her, Emily seemed to give me a faint smile in return, or so I thought. When we returned to the table where Isaac and Liam were waiting, they greeted us warmly. Emily, this is Isaac and Liam. We've been friends since our college days. So you're James's junior at work. You had a rough time back there. Are you feeling okay? The two of them spoke kindly to Emily. Thank you. It's nice to meet you. I'm Emily. James has been so helpful to me at work. And I'm sorry for barging in on your gathering like this. Emily bowed politely, her manners impeccable. Don't worry about it. Let's have a good time here. Yeah. You can sit next to James, okay? Here's the menu. Thank you. With Emily joining us, we started drinking together. So you both work for major companies? That's amazing. Come on, Emily, you work at the same company as James. That makes you just as impressive. Oh no, I'm just lucky to be there, that's all. Emily, there you go being overly modest again. I told you before, you don't need to do that. Sorry. Emily's shoulders slumped at my words. Oh. Did I come on too strong? Hey, James, take it easy. You're scaring her, Isaac teased. I am known for being kind, you know. Yeah, except you're always tough on me. That's because when I'm nice to you, you get cocky. Isn't that right, Liam? Exactly. Isaac needs the tough love. Ugh, you guys are the worst. Emily, back me up here. Emily giggled. You're all so close, aren't you? She looked genuinely amused by our banter. Good. I hoped this would cheer her up, even just a little. Hey, would you mind if we joined you? A cloyingly sweet voice interrupted our drinking session. It was the same woman who had been with Emily earlier. Your table is over there. I said coldly, brushing them off, but they didn't budge. Ugh, those guys were so boring, one of them whined. They don't even work at impressive companies, and their clothes are so cheap looking. The men at their table must have overheard their remarks. When I glanced over, I saw them looking uncomfortable, hastily gathering their things and preparing to leave. Compared to them, the woman who had been called Clara scanned us from head to toe, her eyes lingering on our clothes and accessories. The way she appraised us, as if assigning a value, sent a chill down my spine. You all seem so impressive. We'd love to get to know you better. Emily's an acquaintance of yours, right? Let us join you. I glanced at Isaac and Liam. Both wore expressions as sharp and tense as my own. But I caught a flicker of a cutting glare from Isaac toward the women. It was there for only a moment. Sorry, but drinking with crude people like you would ruin the taste of my drink. No thanks, Isaac said with a polite yet scathing smile. I'll pass too. Your perfume is so overpowering, it would ruin the food and the mood. Their words were sharp, but their faces stayed composed and calm. I feel the same. I can't stand people who hurt others and act like it's nothing. Please leave. There was no way I could forgive the two who had hurt Emily. Without even a hint of a smile, I firmly dismissed them. Having targeted us, likely thinking we were wealthy based on appearances. The two women's expressions turned sour as they realized none of us were taking the bait. What? We're gorgeous women, and we actually bothered to talk to you, and you reject us? Unbelievable. You're into someone like Emily, so obviously you wouldn't appreciate us. We were just being nice to you because you're kind of handsome. But you're clearly not worth it. Come on, Maddie, let's go. With faces twisted in fury, they spat their final words and stormed out of the restaurant, their heels clicking angrily against the floor. I'm so sorry for everything, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily, you have nothing to apologize for, I reassured her. Exactly, Liam added. They were the problem, not you. Liam and Isaac turned to Emily, speaking gently to her. Let's stop apologizing and enjoy the rest of our night, Isaac said warmly. James, everyone, thank you. The rest of the evening went smoothly as we moved to another bar, continuing the gathering. Emily, having opened up more to Isaac and Liam, was smiling and laughing throughout. The next day, as I sat at my desk, Emily approached me hesitantly. James, thank you for last night. I'm glad you had fun, Emily. Also, I'm sorry for my friends, she said, bowing deeply. Those two so-called friends were the ones who were rude. She had done nothing wrong. Emily, I told you, you don't need to apologize for them. But are they really your friends? She hesitated, her expression turning pained. Clara and I have been friends since high school. Maddie is her colleague, and we've ended up together at gatherings like that a few times. Clara. She's always needed to feel superior. She's constantly making fun of my looks to show others she's better. And Maddie, she's just like Clara. Whenever they invite me, it always turns out like that. Listening to her, I felt my stomach turn. I'd encountered people like that before, those who tear others down to build themselves up. But to see it still happening in adulthood? But it can't be helped. I'm plain, and my figure's not great, Emily said with a sad smile. Her words made my blood boil. Emily, you're modest, sure, but you're also incredibly skilled at your job and considerate of everyone around you. People in the office trust you. The ones who laugh at others like that? They're the ones who are wrong. You need to believe in yourself more. And for the record, those two? They're not your friends. If being around them hurts you, you don't have to stay. It's okay to cut ties with people like that. Emily looked at me, wide-eyed, stunned by my outburst. Sorry, I got carried away. But, Emily, I think you should spend time with people who make you feel happy and comfortable. That's how you'll keep smiling, right? You're right. You're absolutely right. Her shoulders trembled slightly. I waited silently as she steadied herself. Thank you, James, she said, her lips curving into a soft, genuine smile. Emily's smile was truly lovely. Wait, what am I thinking? I fumbled awkwardly, which made Emily look at me curiously. By the way, Isaac and Liam said they had fun drinking with you. If you're free, how about joining us again sometime? Really? I'd love to. I'm looking forward to it. Her eyes sparkled with excitement at the suggestion, and something stirred in my chest. What's this unsettling feeling? While I stood there grappling with my emotions, Emily confidently declared, I'll do my best from now on, and returned to her desk. Her newfound determination was admirable, and yet, I couldn't ignore the strange sensation stirring in my chest. From that day forward, Emily began to change. She cut her long bangs and lightened her hair color, revealing her face. Her subtle makeup further accentuated her naturally charming features. Over the following months, she slimmed down slightly, and her wardrobe expanded to include brighter, more stylish outfits. Her transformation didn't go unnoticed. She often chatted cheerfully with other female employees about fashion, her laughter filling the office. The male employees, meanwhile, began buzzing with excitement. Emily had always been known for her excellent work and attentiveness, but now her charm had skyrocketed, making her the center of attention. I occasionally spotted her being asked out on dates. In just a few months, Emily had become a favorite among her colleagues, men and women alike. Her brightened demeanor and the uplifting effect it had on the office were undoubtedly positive. Even team productivity had increased, a welcome benefit for someone in my leadership position. But still, James, Emily, what's the rush? I'm so sorry to bother you again, but have you heard from Isaac and Liam? Are their schedules free yet? Since her transformation, Emily had become much more proactive, often asking about Isaac and Liam's availability. Her enthusiasm only amplified the unease in my chest. Well, Isaac's been pretty busy lately. He said things should calm down soon, though. I see. If it's because of work, then it can't be helped. They both mentioned looking forward to it, so if you could wait just a bit longer, I'd appreciate it. Of course. Sorry for being so persistent. I've just been so excited to see everyone again. Emily's shoulders slumped slightly as she apologized, her tone tinged with guilt. I smiled to reassure her. Don't worry about it. If they heard how eager you are, they'd be thrilled. I promise I'll let you know as soon as we finalize a gathering. Really? Thank you so much, James. I can't wait. Emily beamed before walking away, her excitement palpable. But whose smile was that for? As I pondered her reaction, a thought hit me like a bolt of lightning. Was it possible that Emily had feelings for Isaac or Liam? Could that be why she was so eager about the gathering? It all started to make sense. She started changing the day after that drinking session, I reflected, right after we promised to have another gathering. So, that's how it is, huh? Emily must have fallen for either Isaac or Liam and worked hard to improve herself to catch their attention. Her anticipation for the next gathering was driven by a desire to show them her efforts. That's how it was. This is tough to swallow. I let out a hollow laugh, unable to move from my spot for a while. A few weeks later, the long-awaited gathering finally happened. Emily and I headed to the venue together. When we entered, Isaac was already there. You're pretty early. Yeah, I had some errands to run. But forget that, Emily. You look amazing. That outfit suits you so well. Thank you. I've been working hard. It really shows. The fact that you've put in so much effort is incredible. Right, James? Isaac's praise made Emily blush even more as she smiled bashfully. Meanwhile, I stood there, staring blankly at the exchange. James? Hey! Don't ignore me just because you're mesmerized by Emily. Isaac's teasing finally snapped me out of my daze. So Liam's not here yet, huh? He should be here soon, but let's decide what to order in the meantime, Isaac suggested. As we chatted about what to order, Liam finally arrived, and we began drinking while catching up on each other's lives. I sat quietly, nursing my drink, as Emily, Isaac, and Liam talked and laughed together. Conflicted feelings churned within me. Part of me wanted to cheer them on, but another part couldn't ignore the pang of reluctance. Noticing my distracted state, the others occasionally shot me concerned looks, but I found it hard to fully engage in the conversation. Then, just as the awkward atmosphere seemed to settle, a voice rang out. Wait, is that Emily? No way. Did you change your look? Two familiar faces approached our table. Clara. Maddie. It was the two women who had belittled Emily during the last gathering. I couldn't believe we were crossing paths with them again. Oh, it's the guys from the other day. Good evening, Clara said, flashing a coy smile, clearly still trying to win our favor. A chill ran down my spine. Reflexively, I rubbed my arms, noticing that Liam, seated across from me, was doing the same. What's this? Did you change your look to match these guys? That's hilarious. No matter how much makeup you put on, you're still the same boring old plain Emily. You'll always be a dull girl. Clara sneered at Emily before turning her gaze to us, her smile returning. Did you guys know? Back in school, this girl was all about studying, she didn't know a thing about trends. And she was the most boring person to talk to. Everyone disliked her. Seriously? That's so pathetic, Emily. Maddie chimed in, laughing. Emily lowered her gaze, silent under their barrage of insults. Clara and Maddie's laughter echoed around the table. See? There she goes again, playing the "I'm so pitiful" card. It's pathetic. But honestly, that gloomy vibe suits you better, plain Emily. Clara scoffed, letting out a shrill laugh. That's enough. I couldn't hold back anymore. Standing abruptly, I glared at the two women. You'll never understand how amazing Emily is, will you? She works harder than anyone, always helping those around her. She gives her all to her work, no matter how challenging it is, and her dedication inspires everyone she meets. Her kindness and her smile have brought so much to this company and the people here. She's not just beautiful on the outside, her heart is just as incredible. If you keep insulting her, I won't let it slide. Out of breath. I realized it was the first time I'd ever shouted at someone in anger. Wow, you're getting all worked up over this plain girl? Oh, I get it, you're into Emily, aren't you? That's hilarious. You're just as pathetic as she is. You're probably stuck in some factory job wearing overalls. You two losers are perfect for each other. Clara mocked me as well for standing up for Emily. Her remarks left everyone at the table utterly dumbfounded. Actually, James and Emily both work for Precious the Precious. You know, the major company? Liam, unable to hold back any longer, spoke up and revealed the truth. Yeah, I've heard that before, but isn't it just some subcontractor factory job? Wearing overalls doesn't scream corporate elite. I own the entire Rose Garden series from Precious. It's so gentle on the skin, and the scent is heavenly. Maddie spoke with a dreamy expression on her face. It seemed she was a fan of our products. Seeing an opening, I decided to tell them about Emily. Emily is the one who developed the Rose Garden series, I said calmly. You've got to be kidding me. Emily works in a factory, not development. Clara stammered. She's part of our development team. The Rose Garden series was her idea, and her hard work turned it into one of our biggest hits. Her contributions have played a major role in making Precious the company it is today. And that's not all, she's also responsible for developing Irina and Kyrkos, which I'm sure you've heard of if you're into trends. Clara and Maddie were struck silent, their faces pale with shock. Sometimes Emily visits the production department, so yes, she wears overalls from time to time. But the idea that someone's worth is tied to their clothes is absurd. The people who work hard, regardless of the job, are the ones who make our lives possible. Judging others solely by appearances without showing any respect or gratitude? That's immature and disgraceful. Both Isaac and Liam nodded firmly at my words. Maddie looked down, her face flushed with embarrassment. Clara trembled with indignation. You think you're so great just because you work for a big company? Well, for your information, we work for MK Company, one of the best out there. Clara shouted, clearly grasping at straws. MK Company, a well-known enterprise, even internationally. It was a name to be reckoned with. As I glanced at Isaac, he was smiling brightly, his grin full of confidence. Seeing his expression, I realized there was nothing more for me to say, and I decided to step back. Clara, misunderstanding my retreat as her victory, leaned back smugly with a triumphant smirk. "We're obviously better than you. You and Emily are nothing but small fry compared to us." Okay. May I interrupt for a second? Clara's taunting words were cut short by Isaac, who raised his hand and flashed a cheerful smile. Isaac's light-hearted demeanor caught Clara off guard, leaving her momentarily speechless. "Let me see. Your names were Clara and Maddie, right?" "Yeah." "Why? Did you finally realize how charming we are?" Despite his easygoing appearance, Isaac's striking looks could command attention. Realizing that he remembered their names, both Clara and Maddie seemed pleased, smiling back at him. But then, a hint of doubt crept into Clara's expression, and she asked suspiciously, "Wait, how do you know our names? Did Emily tell you?" Clara turned toward Emily, but Emily quickly shook her head. "How do I know?" "Well, I make it a point to remember the names and faces of people in my company." "Oh, I forgot to introduce myself, didn't I? I'm Isaac, the son of the current CEO of MK Company, the very company you've been bragging about." "But of course. Since you're just temp employees who spend your time flirting and slacking off, I suppose you wouldn't know who I am." Isaac kept his smile intact as he addressed the two women. The warmth in his expression was gone, replaced by an unsettling edge that sent shivers through the room. Clara and Maddie visibly trembled under his gaze. Recently, there's been an issue with people leaking company information, and it's caused a lot of trouble. You two were at a mixer today, weren't you? Sharing confidential details like it was nothing. We've even found past posts you've made on social media. Did you not realize this was a serious violation? Well, I mean... Oh, and about the guys you met at today's mixer, I set that up. They're friends of mine. Pretty handsome, weren't they? They also gave me plenty of evidence about what you said." As Isaac spoke, their faces drained of color entirely, and their bodies began trembling. "It should be interesting tomorrow. Don't bother trying to run, it won't work. You're adults, so act like it and take responsibility, okay?" Standing up, Isaac leaned slightly toward them. "One more thing, I won't forgive anyone who hurts my dear friends. So, leave. I've memorized your faces, but I'd rather not see them any longer." At Isaac's words, the two women let out a panicked eek, before scrambling to their feet and running off in a flustered hurry. Isaac returned to his seat with a look of exasperation. "Honestly, what's wrong with people these days? It's downright depressing." "Isaac, you sound like an old man," Liam teased. "Well, I recognized them as temps from my company a while ago, but I only recently connected them to the issues we've been dealing with. Today was just a coincidence. If they hadn't come over to bother us, I wouldn't have had to take it this far." Isaac popped a piece of fried chicken into his mouth, munching nonchalantly. "Wait. Isaac, are you really the CEO's son?" Emily asked, pressing a hand to her chest in surprise. "Technically, I'm the next CEO. I'm still in training to take over. The reason I've been so busy lately is because I was handling issues involving those two. Sorry it took so long to plan this gathering," Emily said sincerely, bowing slightly. "Not at all. I really appreciate you making time for this despite your busy schedule." "Thank you so much. You're such a good person, Emily," Isaac said in an exaggeratedly kind tone, earning a laugh from her. So, she likes Isaac. Seeing her smile, I thought to myself, it's clear she's drawn to Isaac. Isaac had always been bright, intelligent, and well-liked by everyone, regardless of gender, ever since our school days. It's no surprise Emily would be attracted to someone like him, I concluded silently. If Emily and Isaac ended up together, I should be happy for them. But a tangled mix of emotions churned inside me. James, are you okay? Are you feeling unwell? Emily's concerned voice pulled me out of my thoughts. She looked genuinely worried. Unable to meet her gaze, I glanced down and mumbled, "I'm fine," though my voice lacked conviction. Noticing my unusual behavior, Liam and Isaac exchanged glances and started whispering to each other. After nodding to each other in apparent agreement, they suddenly raised their voices. "Oh no! I just remembered I have to head back to the office." "Same here. My parents just arrived in town, and they're waiting for me at home." Their exaggerated excuses were painfully obvious, but they began gathering their belongings in a rush. Emily, confused by their sudden departure, blinked in surprise. "Wait, you too." I started to protest. "Sorry, James, Emily. Here's my share for tonight. Take care of the bill, okay?" Liam said, placing some cash on the table. "Really sorry about this. But you two can enjoy some time together. Have fun chatting, alright?" With that, they left the table, leaving Emily and me behind in stunned silence. "Emily, take good care of James from now on, okay? James is such a great guy, so you don't need to worry. You two get along well, alright?" With those parting words, Isaac and Liam hurried off. Left alone at the table, we sat there in stunned silence, completely bewildered. What just happened? I muttered, still processing the whirlwind exit. Then it hit me, Isaac had left. Did that mean Emily was disappointed? Panicking, I quickly turned to her. "Emily, now that the others are gone, maybe we should." I was about to suggest calling it a night, thinking she wouldn't enjoy staying with just me. But before I could finish, she interrupted. James, there's something I want to talk about." Emily's voice was louder than I'd ever heard it, and it startled me. My mind began racing. Was she about to tell me she liked Isaac and wanted my help? While these thoughts swirled, her words took me by surprise. I really appreciate everything you've done for me, James." "What?" "I've always struggled with talking to people, just like Clara said. Even at work, I couldn't ask for help when I needed it. I ended up making mistakes, big ones, like when I accidentally deleted that important data. I was completely overwhelmed, but you noticed. You came to help me when I couldn't ask for it myself." Her words brought back a memory I hadn't thought about in a long time. Emily, new to the company, on the verge of tears, looking completely lost. "That was nothing. We managed to recover the data in the end." "Yes, because of you. And I'll never forget what you said to me then, we're all in this together. Let's help each other and do our best." Your words and your smile saved me that day. For the first time, I felt like I belonged. That I had a place here, and that not everyone was as scary as I thought. You made me realize that. Her confession made my chest tighten. The fact that she only began to feel that way after joining the company made it painfully easy to imagine how she had been treated before. It was likely that people like Clara had been at the forefront, relentlessly chipping away at Emily's self-esteem over the years. And since then, you've always looked out for me. Watching you inspired me to do the same for others. And when you thanked me for helping out, it made me so happy. Coming to work became something I looked forward to because of you. Everything I've achieved is thanks to you, James." Her heartfelt words made me blush. Seeing my reaction, Emily hesitated before continuing. "You might not have realized this, but I started dieting and learning about makeup because I wanted you to notice me. When you invited me to that first drinking session, it was so much fun. I wanted to look my best so you'd ask me again. So, I worked hard for you." Her cheeks turned red as she looked up at me, her wide eyes filled with nervous determination. Her words and expression threw my thoughts into complete disarray. Wait, did she just say for James? Did she call me someone she admires? This can't be real. Emily likes me? Unable to process it, I blurted out, "Wait, don't you like Isaac?" Isaac? Why would you think that? Well, you seemed so happy talking to him, I mumbled awkwardly. James, she said firmly, calling my name. I looked up to see her staring directly into my eyes. I've always liked you, James. You're the only one I want to be with. Is that okay? Her unexpected confession left me frozen in place. I knew I had to respond, but my mind couldn't form the words. James, didn't you tell me you should only spend time with people who make you feel comfortable? For me, that person is you. As Emily spoke, her hands trembled slightly. I could only imagine how much courage it took for someone as reserved as her to voice her feelings like this. I searched my scrambled thoughts for the words she deserved to hear. I feel the same. I've always liked you, Emily. I love how hardworking you are, how thoughtful you are toward everyone around you. And I've always been drawn to your smile, it's my favorite thing. As I finished, Emily's eyes widened in surprise. I want to be by your side, Emily. Will you go out with me? I could feel my face burning hotter with every word. I was so embarrassed I could have fainted, but I kept my eyes locked on hers, hoping she could feel the sincerity in my heart. Emily stayed silent for a moment, and then, tears began to spill from her eyes. Wait. Are you crying? Did I say something wrong? I panicked, unsure of what to do. She let out a soft laugh, wiping her tears away. James. I'm just so happy. To hear those words from the person I care about most, it's a kind of happiness I didn't know was possible. As she said those words, she gave me the happiest smile I had ever seen. That smile was the most beautiful one I'd ever witnessed. Later, through Isaac, I heard what happened to Clara and Maddie after that night. The day after our encounter, they were summoned to a meeting with senior executives, where they were confronted about their actions. They ended up in tears, apologizing profusely. However, their conduct had caused a scandal that threatened the company's reputation, so their contracts were terminated on the spot. They were also penalized by their temp agency and subsequently fired. No one knew what became of them after that. Emily received an apology from them, but after I responded on her behalf, they never contacted her again. I was relieved to know that peace had returned to the life of someone so precious to me. Not long after, Emily and I officially started dating. When we shared the news with Isaac and Liam, they burst into laughter. Finally! It's about time you two got together. Apparently, our feelings for each other had been obvious to them from the start. They even confessed that their exaggerated departure during the recent gathering had been a deliberate attempt to push us closer. Let us handle the best man speeches at the wedding, alright? And we're definitely making a sappy, nostalgic video montage for you too. Come on, don't get ahead of yourselves. Watching them get carried away, Emily laughed, her joy lighting up the room. Cherished friends and a beloved partner. The people I want to spend my life with. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for having met them. That's why I wanted to treasure this miraculous connection. To remain someone they'd want to be with, now and in the future. As I looked at their smiling faces, I resolved to keep improving myself, to be worthy of the love and friendship they gave me.